Hi, everyone. Jake Solomon here. We at Firaxis Games just wanted to lend our genuine support to anyone who might have been affected by yesterday's layoffs, and we're hopeful that we can offer some of you a home because we're hiring for a lot of different positions right now that you can check out at firaxis.com/careers. We are looking for programmers, animators, character artists, UI designers, a lot of different roles. At Firaxis, we have been making games for over 20 years. I personally have been here for 19 of those years, and I intend to be here for at least 19 more if they'll have me. As a company, we are stronger than ever. We have lots of exciting projects on the horizon that we hope that you could potentially be a part of. As devs, to our fellow devs, I mean this when I say we feel for you. We hope this transition is quick for you, regardless of whether you're interested in Firaxis or not. And so good luck to each and every one of you, and thank you.
Hello, Civ fans. I am Sarah Darney, your host for today, as we get prepped for the exciting launch of Civilization VI Gathering Storm. It is coming out in about 10 hours now, tonight at midnight Eastern Standard Time. So today we're going to go a little bit behind the scenes. We've got a lot of really fun stuff to show you guys. We're going to be talking about leaders, how they came to be designed, how they came to have art and come to life. We're going to be talking to some animators, concept artists. We've got a couple composers coming too, so we can talk about the music. We have a little bit about modding, and at the end of the stream, we're going to show you the new Black Death scenario. I don't think any of our streamers have shown this yet, so new gameplay. But first, let's get started. We have Ed Beach and Dennis Shirk in the studio today.
Hello, hello.
Thank you guys for coming.
Welcome, Civ fans. It's great to be on once again, and now we're just so close to the launch. It's really exciting.
It's just hours away.
Yes.
So I just want to get started and talk about like the history of the franchise and what you guys have contributed to it, because I know we've got a couple of veterans here. So Ed, you were you're the franchise lead designer for Civilization VI. How long have you been part of Civ?
Well, I've been at Firaxis for 10 years, so just crossed that threshold in the fall. And I first was hired in to work on the gameplay systems for Civ 5. John was the lead designer then, but I was particularly getting all the gameplay systems ready for what we wanted to do for like unique abilities for civilizations. And then I also had a big role in setting up the AI for Civ 5 as well. I wasn't a total newcomer to the Civ system. At that point. I had actually worked as a subcontractor to Firaxis on the Civ 3 Conquest expansion pack. So was familiar with how a Civ game went together, what design for a Civ game looked like, what the base game looked like versus what we could do with scenarios, that kind of stuff. But obviously once I got here, full immersion.
What about you, Dennis?
I've been here almost 15 years. I've been working on Civ titles since Civilization 4, back when I was in marketing department. You're familiar with that?
I am.
I made the jump during Civilization 5 development and helmed Civilization 5, both expansions, working with John and then Ed, and then continued on Civilization 6. Briefly handed off Rise and Fall to the very capable hands of Andrew Fredrickson, and then returned for Gathering Storm, which is really exciting because this is the expansion I've always wanted.
Oh, really?
Not everybody is a environmental event kind of guy, but I am.
Okay.
So for those of you who are like that, make sure to crank it up to 4 tonight once you've unlocked the game and make things a lot more interesting.
All right, so what part of Gathering Storm are you guys most excited to see fan response to?
Well, I'll just continue what I was just talking about.
Go on.
Obviously, there's a lot of great things to enjoy in Gathering Storm, and probably most of you watching this have already read through a lot of the reviews, previews, watched a lot of the streams. But for me, it's just the life of the world. I mean, the World Congress is a lot of fun. The power systems are a lot of fun. But all of my mojo is right there in the world. The storms, the droughts, trying to manage your effect on climate change, the way sea levels rise, the effects that has on gameplay. It just adds a whole new dimension. Because typically, a player is only playing in reaction to the other civilizations in the game. That's it. And this adds a whole other level. And it's, it's that way in real life. You can't just count on just what somebody else is going to do to you. You have to watch what things are happening around you. And I just think it adds a whole new element that just wasn't there before. It wasn't there in Civilization 5. It wasn't there up till now in Civ 6. That's what I'm most excited about.
Nice. What about you?
I actually think the civilizations themselves.
Okay.
By the time we get to the second expansion, we can get more creative. Yeah. We can throw things out of whack even further than, we know how far to go to make things really interesting, but not totally unbalanced. So between the Mali, who can't really produce things the same way everyone else can, but they don't need to because they have so much gold, it's just not a problem, to the Maori, who start in the middle of the ocean and have to find, where possibly can we settle? There are all these continents around us, but we don't know which one's going to have the open space for us. So I think the civilizations themselves are great fun, and we're going to get lots of input as to which ones they think are strongest, and we're going to be paying attention to that too, because we want to make any tweaks we need to them, and we want to look at maybe adjusting some of the base game or the Rise and Fall civs as well. So we're going to definitely have our ear to the ground, and so that's the reaction I'm kind of looking at.
I can't stress that enough, by the way. While our QA department does an excellent job of giving us all kinds of feedback, it's not until you have 1 million people really playing your game that you get the excellent feedback. So continue posting about it on the forums. You may think that we're not there, but we're there. We're always watching. So.
I think the thing that I'm most excited about is just seeing the stories that people will post about, their games, their histories that they're going to be writing. When you and Carl had your multiplayer game the other day, it played out
epic.
It played out in such a different way than I expected, and just seeing
people have posted. I bet that was scripted.
We couldn't script that. We're not that good.
We're not, especially to get the AI that close to victory, and so.
I found Carl in the kitchen yesterday, and I was just like, how's it going? He's like, it'd be better if it weren't for hungry, and this. It was actually a day later, still kind of walking around, a little shell-shocked in the eyes, because he wasn't expecting it at all. And apparently what he had said is that he had just missed the denouncement that came through. If he had seen the denouncement, he might have been ready, but it was just a subtle thing that changed his.
I think Pete and I actually ended up. Carl, look at those notifications again. Yeah. So we made sure he did eventually see it before it left the screen, but he was very surprised.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about some of the things that are coming with Gathering Storm. The weather and the climate system is this huge added layer to the living world of Civilization 6.
Yeah.
You've already talked about that a little bit. So how did that kind of start in the design phase? What kind of iterations did it go through?
This will echo back to anyone who looked at our very first stream, because I remember we were focusing on that then, but it's actually always bothered me how static the Civilization world was. And the fact that there could be floodplains that never did anything, and mountains that you knew were volcanic, but they never erupted. And we had actually had, I think in that Civ 3 Conquest expansion, we put in volcanoes that could erupt. But we hadn't put them in recently, and I just wanted the world to have more life. So the first thing we knew we started right there with floodplains and volcanoes. And we were like, let's put those in, get them tested, see how those work, see how that felt. And I think everyone got excited right away, and they're like, what about everything else? And we wanted to be a little bit careful. We didn't want to put in too many things that just felt random. It just felt like, wow, that's punishing, and I had no way of protecting myself from it or knowing it was coming or whatever. So
it's still a strategy game at the end of the day.
Yeah.
A disaster simulator.
So we wanted to tell you if you're going to settle in a dangerous spot, and we wanted to be careful. People ask me all the time, what about earthquakes and tsunamis? And yes, maybe we could add those kind of things down the road, but those are things where they do strike very unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And earthquakes, there are earthquake prone areas, so we could maybe make some indications about that, but those are always already the areas where volcanoes are going to hit and things like that. So we wanted to make it somewhat predictable. And so when we need more of this stuff because it's just fun and it's making the world feel alive. We decided to add storms, but I wanted to make sure that I could even out the distribution of those around the map. So I didn't want to just have hurricanes or just have sandstorms. I wanted to try to get all the different terrain biomes hit relatively evenly and then I make sure that the code is accounting for where each one's starting. So you actually do see in the game that there's some patterns, like just because of the way hurricanes move, they have prevailing winds and stuff. I have enough of that in there that that you will see like a hurricane alley form, but it actually, most of those hurricanes are starting in different locations on the map. They just happen to be taking the same path, because I wanted to try to make it so it was very rare that storms would start in exactly the same spot multiple times in the same game.
Nice. So a lot of the things that, came to Gathering Storm, they're very new for this series. Besides World Congress, there's just a lot of stepping out of this known comfort zone that we had. So what's it like to have things a little more open-ended? Is it more challenging, or is it, you get to spread your wings a little?
I actually sort of love working on the second expansions,
Okay.
Both for Civ 5 and Civ 6. Those are the times with Brave New World and now with Gathering Storm where with the base game, you're so concerned with just getting all the systems in place and getting them all balanced with each other properly and making sure the AI is understanding everything. And then even for the first year or so after release, there's a lot of feedback that's come in, and you have to be responding to that and getting everything lined up. Finally, by the time you get to the second expansion, it's like, okay, we have a nice stable platform to build on. We don't really have quite as many fires to put out. So let's do something entirely new for the series or creative. So with Brave New World, we added so much in terms of the great works and the archaeology system and that whole new culture victory and then ideologies. Had a ton of fun with that. We definitely wanted to, we had enough of that in Civ 6 already that, again, we had to pick a new direction.
Right, yeah.
And so with Gathering Storm, it was climate and man and the environment and that relationship. And not only was it just sort of the climate coming at man, but I love the idea that we could also have man push back at the environment. And so canals and the Golden Gate Bridge and the Panama Canal as wonders, and building dams, and it feels really good when you can make a change that really impacts the map, so that all of a sudden something has just opened up in the game for you.
You really challenged the graphics team this time. Typically, the engine team doesn't have, they're constantly tweaking and refining and making it a little faster. And then every time Ed would bring up terrain deformation, there'd always be a little bit of a shudder you'd feel coming out of the graphics office. And this time
earthquake in the Firaxis office.
He pulled out all the stops, and he's like, we need it to flood. Yeah, we need the terrain to depress when it floods. Also canals, and we want volcanoes to erupt.
There are a lot of interesting
storms.
configurations of canals. Like, can this piece meet with this piece? And if it's so we had to go back and forth to work all that out as well.
The best bug with that was there was a tornado bug where you'd see a tornado and the tornado would move, and then everybody would be dying way down here and off to the sides. And we sent the save over to Ed going, Ed, what's wrong with this? This isn't working. The tornado went this way and all these other people died. And he's like, well, that's because it's only using the beginning and the end of the path. And then when they actually hooked it up and wired it up, the tornado was going ooh, like it would in real life, and you actually saw this trail of destruction.
I actually sent a series of maps of tornado paths across the Atlantic to our graphics programmer who was working on it, and saying, shh, believe me, tornadoes and hurricanes, like so it was a hurricane path map.
Yeah.
They do not travel in straight lines.
Right.
Because he had done a nice curving spline from point A to point B, which looked visually very impressive, but it wasn't what the gameplay was mapping to and what sort of real life maps to. So Ted and I worked that out. We got that sorted out. But
big kudos to the graphics team. They really stepped up, and not only that, but people will notice a lot of the improvements in terms of graphic performance, the particle effect system, all the things that we're patching into the game, into the back patching into the other games. Gathering Storm is probably the best running, most efficient Civ that we've ever had as well. Turn time improvements, the whole 9 yards. Just a lot of work that went into all of that.
And an awful lot of that did get patched back to the base game in XP1. So when people get their patch notes later today, they'll be able to just go through the laundry list of everything that's been done, and it's quite an impressive list.
All right, so another question I've got for you guys. Diplomacy is a big part of the Civilization game. So the grievances system and the other changes that went in for Gathering Storm, how did they come to be? Like, what was that like trying to create these?
We've got one member of our design team, and I'll give a shout out to David Raby, who's just been entirely focused on diplomacy ever since he started working with us during the Rise and Fall period. So he put in the emergencies for Rise and Fall. He helped buff our government district. He was been our point person on World Congress throughout. And if that wasn't enough, he's like, I also want to change the warmonger system and let's add grievances. And David and I had to kind of work it out because he had too much on his plate with World Congress to get that in as well. But I was like, you've got a great plan for what we should do with grievances. Let me take that off your plate and make sure that gets in. So I did a lot of the work on the grievance system. We had a lot of help from our UI team, adding a whole new panel where we can kind of itemize. It's much better than the warmongering system was, not only in terms of the players feeling like it's more fair, but now there's also this nice detailed log of each time a grievance has triggered one way or another. And so you can see that, you can go back, oh yeah, that makes sense now why that guy is still mad at me because I'd forgotten that I had sacked 3 of his cities and hadn't given them back to him.
I keep the same kind of log on my phone for people that I know.
Yeah. So there's
That's
probably,
horrifying.
maybe there is an app for that.
Yes.
Oh boy. Now I'm scared. What have I done to Dennis? What grievances do you have against me?
On the list.
All right, so when we're moving into this, future era, the Gathering Storm deals a lot with the future, both the late game and beyond, things that we haven't done before. How was it to design kind of this near future that's not based on history? Like it's not things we've done yet before.
It's interesting. This went down a few different paths. I mean, we always intended on putting a future era in the game, but it started out a lot more traditionally.
Okay.
Railgun ships, the typical near future units, typical appended tech tree, arrow to the end of the tech tree, typical end of tech tree text. And as we were fooling around with that and exploring it more, we decided to stretch our legs a little bit. Like Ed mentioned earlier, experimentation in XP2 is rather welcome. So Anton decided to start noodling with what happens at the end of the game. And part of that was the idea of randomizing the tech tree and then hiding what was at the end, which is what ended up shipping in the game. So you can never see what's there until you get close enough and research the tech before, and then it exposes the connections that come up, which is a great new approach. It's funny, like mid-development, after he put this in, he just was like, I wonder what it'd be like to randomize the whole tree. You turn that on, and then after we put out all the fires and the people that had ripped shirts off and there was just debris everywhere, we fixed that and put it back the way it was supposed to be because that was horrifying, but it was a fun thing to do because it's just experimenting like that is often fun. I think Ed mentioned that if modders really wanted to dig, that those bits are still in there if they wanted to play with it. But it was great to just watch that process unfold and come up with something completely new that was not in Civ before. And then the GDR came back, and they didn't want it to be like it was before. And the reason we don't have the traditional units at the end was because we decided to do an upgrade path for a unit. So the GDR would upgrade different abilities depending on the tech that you unlocked. So it just gets stronger and stronger. I saw a review that said it is hilariously and awesomely overpowered because once it's all stocked up and everybody has them, you're leveling cities. And at that point in the game, if you've played that far into the game, you want that very satisfying feeling of having something very powerful that you worked very hard to get to. And it's an exhilarating new unit in the game to fool around with, especially when you have visuals like walking through shallow water. You can like go into water and you can fight in the water just like you would fight on the land. It's just, the graphics team again is really stepping up. The VFX team is stepping up. So the future era stuff is really exciting in this one. If you decide to devote yourself and play that deep in the game, you're going to be really rewarded.
And you do have to sometimes. If you're on a challenging difficulty level and you're trying to get either a culture or science victory that just, we've pushed those back in the game, so they're further in there, and especially culture where you have to overcome how well the AI is doing. If the AI is playing a strong culture game, it just takes a while. So you end up getting through all that content pretty often, I think, at least in my playthroughs I have. So people are going to have fun with that.
Nice. And speaking of people, our lovely fans out there, what suggestions and feedback from the fans, like how does that affect the process? How much do you listen to? How do you balance like what everyone wants, the leaders that people are asking for with, what the team wants to do?
It's always part of our calculations. Even when I remember back to, I think it was Brave New World, the leader selection process was a little different than normal because we had a survey come back to us because we had done a survey on what are the civs that you think are missing from the game. And we wanted to factor that into our equation of selecting what leaders were going to go in for Brave New World. And for the longest time, I think it was like a week-long process. We had these big marker boards up. We actually had voting periods, cut downs, the reasons for and against, who was on the bubble. The unfortunate time when you're watching Canada just on the bubble, but not quite getting there. But that process is amazing and fantastic because part of that is the fans telling us what they would love to see balanced out with what the design team and Ed really need to have in the game. And it's not just that, it's even whether if something is just out of whack or out of balance, players reporting something they would love to see, modders putting up a mod and it becoming really, really popular because it obviously presents a deficiency that we have in something like our UI. All of those things are amazingly useful, and we just vacuum it all in. It's just amazing. I want to say a collaboration, even though they're not necessarily collaborating, but they are without actually actively knowing it.
The one thing that Gathering Storm includes that's absolutely an homage to the fans are the canals.
Yeah.
And so many times fans have posted, look at my canal city setup. I've got 3 canals getting from this interior lake all the way out to the sea. So we knew fans would find a canal district and things like the Panama Canal very popular, but absolutely the fans were right there because as soon as I started making it so you could build a canal district and all of a sudden my ships were sailing places they weren't, there's just like this amazing visceral feeling of being able to drive your ship through a canal that I didn't realize was going to be there that's absolutely there with the game now.
Right.
All right, I've got one more question and then we're going to dive into our next segment. I heard a rumor that you could tell us a little bit about what's coming on the horizon with modding.
Sure. Well, I can't say specific dates because it's still in progress. Once we switched off of our official Gathering Storm work, we turned our attention to getting all of the modding and SDK tools updated. So that's in process, coming soon. Again, I'm not going to give you an exact date. Hopefully, well before spring, we shall see. But we're going to be updating all the tools. We're going to be updating the art depots to include all of the Expansion 1 and Expansion 2 art packs. We're going to make sure Scout Cat gets in there too, just because we've seen way too much feedback that there needs to be cats and tanks and cats here and cats there. Cats and tanks.
Cats everywhere.
Pretty neat, yes. World Builder received updates for this expansion, and later on I believe you're going to be talking to Dave McDonough and Carl about Black Death. And Black Death was a great exercise because we basically told Dave, who hasn't worked in the Civ 6 engine, to basically come in and create the most radical expansion scenario you can with just the modding tools. And when he ran into roadblocks, we corrected those roadblocks. So even with World Builder, those who know how to enable it, it's still a dev tool. It's not user-facing yet because we still have more work to do on it that we're progressing on. But the simplest things like being able to paint a continent in the tool instead of doing it tile by tile, having coastal stuff show up automatically. There's a lot of little issues, big issues that we're correcting, but we took care of a lot of those in the build that's coming out. There's more to come, and that'll come out with the SDK too.
And just so people are aware kind of what had to be done for World Builder just to support Gathering Storm, we have taken all the TSL maps, and there are new versions of those that go out with Gathering Storm. And so they have the ability to place volcanoes and the ability to mark coastal lowlands and all those kind of features that you need to make a map respond to all the systems within Gathering Storms. Those can be set up in World Builder now, so it's definitely getting there.
Yeah, but keep in mind, we are not done, but we're forging ahead, so there's even better things on the horizon for that, so stay tuned.
Soon. Very soon.
Very soon.
All right, so what I want to do today, and we're going to start this with you guys, is I want to talk about how we create leaders from the very beginning with like just the initial kind of idea all the way to the end and getting that person in game. So I kind of wasn't sure necessarily who I wanted to pick, but for multiple reasons, we went with Coupe of the Maori. So we're going to talk a little bit about him and how he came to be. So first question I have for you, when you chose this expansion theme for Gathering Storm, how did that affect the leaders that you picked?
It's interesting that when we're selecting leaders, sometimes they're directly tied into the theme that we have for the expansion, and we have a few leaders fall out that way. Other times it's more like we need to expand and get a civ into West Africa. So geographically we need to expand. So we get maybe the Mali brought into the game for that reason, or we get the Ottomans brought in because we need some kind of warmongering civ, and we've been saving them back Haven't included them in the base game, haven't included in Rise and Fall, but we knew that we wanted to do them when we had all the power of the second expansion to bring them to life. And so we waited for them until now, but we knew, okay, now it's their time. But the Maori are definitely an interesting case because we did not, Coupe has a very strong environmental agenda, and that's sort of the theme of playing them.
Yeah.
But we didn't arrive at that right away. First of all, we identified Polynesia had been a very popular civ in Civilization V, and so we should go back and revisit that. There were a lot of people, both we knew the fans liked it, but there was a lot of people internally on the team that were clamoring to, let's get some Polynesian representation in there. So we looked at various segments of Polynesia. We decided we did not necessarily need to go as broad as we had before. We have this ability now to work in city-states, and we decided very early on that we're going to have the Rapa Nui city-state, and we would get the Moai statues into the game.
We had to.
Through a city-state with the unique city-state improvement. So that gave us sort of the flexibility to do what we really wanted to do, which was dive in deep on one specific Pacific culture. And so we looked at Tonga, we looked at Samoa, both who've been very powerful nations in that part of the world. But we kept coming back to the Maori. Just very unique look to how their warriors, we had used their warriors as the unique unit for Polynesia in Civ 5. The art team was incredibly excited with the chance to have a Maori leader in the game. So then I also started reading up a little bit about their environmentalism and how they really are pushing to try to save and protect the Pacific Ocean. And once I realized that was going to fit so well with the expansion theme, they became a done deal at that point.
Nice. Okay. So is it always kind of the same way, like this ability or behavior of a civilization? Does that always come first, and then you kind of find a way to fit it in, or do you know sometimes okay, we have to have this civ, now we design that?
Yeah, it works both ways.
Okay.
So, for instance, Eleanor of Aquitaine is a good example of us having a gameplay mechanism sort of that we knew we wanted to attach to a leader or a civilization. We had, Anton had talked when we did the live stream on her about how we had experimented with loyalty having different effects, and maybe it would flip a city directly to the person who was putting the loyalty pressure on it. So we knew that was a cool effect to play around with, but back when we were working on Rise and Fall, we weren't sure how strong to make it. We didn't want to include that in that expansion. We wanted to look for someone down the line who that'd be very fitting.
Yeah.
Eleanor, we didn't immediately think, oh, she's naturally this person who messes with loyalty. We actually stumbled upon her because it was so compelling to have somebody who had been so influential in two different nations. During her, she lived an incredibly long time. So, she actually, it wasn't just a few years that she was influential in France and a few years influential in, it was decades. She was influential in both those countries. So she was just a great fit for an alternate leader, and having alternate leaders that could plug in multiple spots was a great way to go. And so it was sort of that we got to both those things separately and then married them together. Coupe was very different in terms of as soon as we knew we wanted to bring the Maori in, we started looking for leader candidates, and we looked at what the modders had done for Civ 5. They had several Maori mods, and they had tended to focus on 19th century Maori leaders who did a great job of repelling some of the British invasions of their island. But it was hard to pick which one, hard to figure out which one stood out, and the idea of what Coupe had done, where he had packed up all his belongings and just said, we're going to strike out and we're going to trust that we're going to find a new homeland. That was just such a great story that that also was not only a great story, but it was a great story for players in the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we absolutely made it so that the Maori are going to start the game out in the middle of the ocean with no idea which direction land is, and you have to go and make that same voyage that Coupe made.
Nice. All right, so there we go. We got it up there. So what kind of character did you want Coupe to be? He's this sort of semi-mythical being. You know, we don't have video of him or photographic evidence. So, like, I guess you kind of had a little bit of room to play there with how he would be.
We absolutely did. But once we realized we were going to tie the Maori to an environmental theme, and the inspiration for that was interesting because I started reading and doing as much background research on the Maori as I could, and I found this video where a group within the last 5-10 years had sailed from New Zealand in the Waka ocean-going canoes all the way across the Pacific. And they have pictures of them sailing in under the Golden Gate into San Francisco Bay as part of their message of, you know, we care deeply about what's going on in the Pacific. We want it to be as cleaned up and nice to live in for all the people in the Pacific Basin as possible. So that just sort of was a kind of a key finding. I'm like, okay, we want to make sure that this is a civ that thinks real carefully before they knock down any environmental, you know, trees, forests, woods, rainforests, whatever nearby them. And that's sort of a fun new twist on gameplay as well. And so, you know, we said that's going to be the leader agenda. That's going to drive that part of his character. Now, naturally, because the Maori people are so expressive and they have the haka and everything else, you know, there's a lot more to Coupe when you meet him in game than just his environmentalism. But, you know, I just sort of let the art team take that and run with that side of him. Because,
we're about to talk to them, and I'm so excited because there's some really cool art that we're going to show.
That's a great story too. So it'll be good for the fans if they haven't read any of the New Zealand articles where we've gone into that deeper, just to hear about the process that you go through for somebody like Coupe, especially for his Tamaka for the facial tattoos and how important they are and the meaning behind them.
Yeah.
Was a lot of great challenges that the art department had to overcome to make sure that we did that one right.
So how do you decide what's going to be the civ's ability versus the leader's ability? You know, it sounded like Coupe had his journey story, and that was going to be his ability.
Right.
But how do you kind of figure out?
So the what we put elsewhere in the civ was the fact that they can get a lot more out of keeping woods and rainforest and all the other features around them undisturbed. But it was that ocean-going voyage that you start out in the middle and sort of the bonuses necessary to make that happen that we had to all tie to the leader. So just in case people do want to experiment and have an alternate Maori leader who's one of those, maybe leaders who helped fight off the British, they can do that. And they'll have a more traditional start. They won't start in the middle of the ocean, but they can come up with some other great bonuses for them. So it's all about looking at, if you were going to pull that leader out, what's sort of the core essence that has to stay back with the civ and the unique unit and unique improvement to sort of still make it a logical whole.
Right. It still has to stand on its own.
Yeah.
Now, we had a little bit of changes to that with Eleanor and England, correct?
Right.
So how do you kind of deal with that situation when leaders come out later after the fact and you have to be like, okay, I don't know that this person necessarily works with the original civ?
Yeah, it was tricky with Eleanor because we knew that England had to be sort of one of our flagship civs for all the industrial age, industrial revolution changes we wanted to have. And so canals, there was a canal mania that overtook England in the late 18th century or into the 19th century, where they were building canals madly. And so some recognition of that, which we did by giving their military engineers extra charges to build canals very quickly, we wanted to have that in the game no matter what. And so we were changing England's ability. We were getting rid of the British Museum ability that would have definitely helped Eleanor, but we realized pretty soon that that was actually going to be too strong with Eleanor. So I think it actually worked out okay. But it's definitely something we have to keep in mind. If necessary, it's been nice because we have been able to go back into our older civs and, revamp them, change their abilities. So as we keep progressing forward with Civ 6, it's also fun because, I recently played a game as Teddy again because America's gotten a big update.
Oh, yeah, that's
And so
true.
I hadn't played an American game for a while. So it's great to say, oh, wow, this Civ's, feels brand new, and let me go give it a try.
All right, so were there any leaders that were just particularly challenging to figure out how they would play. Like, you know, we are not two-dimensional people. Everyone has different sides to them. Though Carl is a bit of a warmonger at times, he's also a very cultural player.
Yeah, Carl's good at the cultural game, and I don't think I was gonna. If I hadn't used my advantage as Hungary, I think I would have lost the cultural game to him because he was starting off strong there. Yeah, Hungary's actually a good example itself because Matthias, although he expanded the Hungarian borders as far as they ever were able to go and had the largest Hungarian empire, and so obviously was a great military leader as well. He's actually probably just as well known for the huge collection of books that he collected and how he was sort of a Renaissance man, looking at what was going on in Italy during the Renaissance and trying to bring all that kind of new, exciting culture and art and everything to Hungary. So we could have taken him in an entirely different direction. But it's just sort of, that was a case of we had found a really fun new way to twist the gameplay for Hungary with the city-state emphasis and giving him really great abilities to levy city-state troops that, some people might have taken advantage of recently.
It's just sitting here grinning.
And so we knew we wanted to go with that. So we actually said, okay, well, maybe Matthias will reappear in some other game and maybe he'll have a more cultural bonus that time. But this time he's not going to be cultural.
Interesting. I've never thought about it before, but it would be interesting to see, like, the double leader we have with Eleanor, just the same Civ, but just a different take.
Well, and the modders have explored that, and I think they'll continue to explore that.
Okay, cool.
So
that's awesome.
The Steam Workshop has all sorts of great stuff on it.
All right, so history, obviously, is a big inspiration as, we're designing Civilization, but it can be limiting. There are certain things that happen in the game that, have never happened in history, like America building the pyramids or Australia building the Great Wall of China. So how do you balance, like, the historical accuracy with, just fun gameplay and making sure that it feels right?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with those two examples. That's what Civilization is. So we start everybody out the same. The history on that starting point is all the same. We know who the people are, we know what the civs are, we know what they start with, their unique stuff. And the fun of Civ is how you build your own history from that point on. So when you start at the start of the Stone Age and Teddy Roosevelt builds the pyramids, it's because that's what Civilization enables you to do. I think if you were playing a straight historical Civ, it would not be the same game. If you had limits on what they were allowed to do, it would not be the same game. So just the ability that, Teddy Roosevelt gets in the early war with Montezuma, because you built the pyramids and he wanted the pyramids, so you sent all of your ancient cavalry to go strike at his modern battleships. These are situations that can unfold in Civ. And yes, balancing all of that to make it that all engaging and fun is his job, not mine. But that's what makes it so much fun, because you can have just about any situations. And you've had the eternal argument going on in the community forever, Spearman versus tank. And that argument will never completely go away. And we've been, fighting with it for a long time, going one way or the other. No, they shouldn't be able to scratch a tank. Yes, that's half the fun, is the possibility of killing the tank. It's just like moving your settler on the first turn. These are all things that make Civilization what it is. But I'll leave the design considerations to this guy.
And I think all I want to say there is just that the history is great because it allows us to come up with brainstorm, ideas as to what could this person's unique ability could be. What is going to make this unique unit special? How is this, unique district or unique improvement going to work? So the history inspires us there, but we have to make sure it's all going to make sense within the game model that we've created. And so ultimately the gameplay is going to win out. But the history can, it can lead to situations that feel correct. And whenever that happens, that's always kind of the coolest moment for us as designers. It's like, yes, we actually saw this giant Spanish fleet that was Armada size that was sailing across the ocean to try to conquer another Civ. When you see those kind of things, you're like, okay, now things are lining up well. This is great.
I like it when things don't line up well at all.
Yeah, and sometimes some people don't, but
that story.
The people who've read a lot of the
part.
history, you know.
So whenever we announce a new leader or a new civ, we always see comments about that leader, like, oh, they weren't the most well-known person, or they weren't the greatest leader of this civ. Why would you ever pick them? But I think it's more than like just picking the greatest person in history or the most well-known person. So how do you decide when you're going to pick, the most well-known person versus someone who's might be less well-known but have a more interesting playstyle?
Yeah, and I think that's changed as we've gone through the series. I think now some nations have appeared 6 times in their series, and so we feel like sometimes we want to put a leader in because he is a fan favorite, and we want to not break that streak that they've had of being in the game. But sometimes it's fun to shake things up and go in a different direction. And France, for instance, has been in the game every single time, and we've had a lot of different leaders for France, and we just had Napoleon in Civ 5, and we wanted to, we looked at that as a Civ where we could do some experimentation this time, and we really, really needed to find a way to emphasize and get people interested in the new espionage game that we were putting in for Civ 6. It was kind of more detailed and nuanced than anything we had done before. And we wanted somebody in our game to be just really good at playing with that particular play style. So Catherine Medici was a leader I was very familiar with, and I knew that was just how she had held on to power during those years that she was trying to keep her family on the throne in France. And so it just was a case of finding the right fit for that particular leader. But other times, I think the first time that we introduce a leader or a nation into the game is we're very unlikely to pick a more controversial pick. So for instance, Hungary's going into the game for the very first time now. We want to sort of pick a leader for them that's going to let all those people in Hungary who are getting into the civilization, someone that they can really stand behind and be proud of. And so we actually do things like we look at who's on the currency of the country, who's are in statues in public squares, those kind of things. So that gives us an idea of making sure that we're actually picking somebody who is well esteemed in that country.
Nice. All right. Well, I have one more question before I let you guys go. Part of the world of Civ is all the different cities on the map, and I've seen quite a few people asking, how do you pick like the city names for the individual civs? Because sometimes it's like the old words, sometimes it's the new words. What goes into that?
It's sometimes cities don't exist. Sometimes they didn't have cities. Sometimes there's not enough
That's
cities.
That's the hardest one, yeah.
So oftentimes we'll have to create cities from geographic locations. We'll take some modern cities and mix them in there as well. A lot of it's just based on game mechanics of wanting X amount of cities in there as well. A lot of times we'll be lucky enough with a more traditional civilization where all those city names are available. They're just readily available. For things like the Maori, that's not so much. You have to take geographic features, modern towns, things like that. So it's always a challenge, but the research always bears out. There's plenty of things to find to populate those lists with.
And we actually had some New Zealand members of our beta test team who live over there, and they helped us massage that list. And so the list, that was actually, I think, a list where we actually iterated on it 2 or 3 times to get it to where it needed to be. And they helped us with that a lot. And so in general, if we have resources like that, we want to take advantage of it. The other thing about city name lists is if a leader, like Victoria was in power in England during the 19th century. So we actually go and our designers who are doing this research look at population of cities at that time period.
Oh, okay.
And we try to put the cities in an order. So if people like wondering, like, Brasilia is the capital of Brazil, why isn't it first on the Brazilian city list? Well, when Pedro was in charge of Brazil, I don't think they'd even founded this new capital city of Brasilia yet, so it didn't deserve to be first on the list. So you know, a lot of thought like that goes into it. The tough ones are the ones like the Cree and the Mapuche,
Right.
where there really are not cities the way you would think of it.
Right.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us. I hope everyone out there has enjoyed it. We've got a lot more coming up today. We're going to take a quick break, though, and just let our new guys come in and get settled in, and we will talk a little bit more about Coupe and the art. Civilization 6 Gathering Storm is coming your way in just a few hours, tonight at midnight Eastern Standard Time.
Coupe leads the Maori in Civilization 6 Gathering Storm. Coupe leads the Maori in Civilization VI Gathering Storm.
Hello, Civ fans. Welcome back. We are going to talk a little bit more about Coupe of the Maori and how he came to life. We have a couple of members of the art team here to talk about it. But first, because it is launch week and Civilization VI Gathering Storm is coming your way real soon, we have a lot of fun stuff going on social media, on Steam. So on Steam right now, Civilization VI and a whole bunch of DLCs are all on sale, everything but Gathering Storm. Things are up to 70% off, I think, which is awesome. It's a great time to get in if you haven't played. Also, it's play for free right now. I think this ends tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So if you hop on Steam, you've maybe never tried Civilization VI before, you got nothing to lose, it's free. And on our social media, we have a Intel CPU giveaway. So head on over to our Twitter page for Civilization and see what it's all about. All right, so now I want to introduce, we have Grant Cheng, animator, and Kat Berkeley, concept artist. And thank you guys so much for being here and joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, we don't often get artists on the stream, so I'm really glad you guys could come and do this and talk about it, because it really is a big, important part of the game that brings everything to life.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess just give us a little introduction and how long have you been here? What have you worked on?
Oh, well, I've been here. Yeah, don't mind if I go first?
Oh, yeah, go for
So
it.
I've been here for a little over 4.
No!
Oh, man, all right.
All right, so we're gonna have a fight right now on the stream live.
So, yeah, I've been at Firaxis for a little over 4 years, and I started out working on Beyond Earth Rising Tide, and hopped on to Civ 6 after that, and been working on the expansions for that ever since.
Nice.
Similarly, I've been here for about as long as Grant, and I think I checked it recently. It's exactly 4 years, 11 months, so almost 5 years.
Almost 5 years. Awesome. So, what was your first game that you worked on when you were here?
Beyond Earth.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Oh, both you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, was it weird going from like sci-fi kind of stuff to a more historical thing? Did you like that? Was it challenging?
I'm a huge history nerd.
Okay.
So I was very excited. I was excited for both projects, really, but I'm pretty much up to do either history or sci-fi. They're both fun for me.
Yeah, I mean, I loved working on sci-fi. You know, that's the first time
Yeah.
I got to work on creatures and stuff. That
Oh,
was like a lot of
nice.
fun. And but yeah, doing the history stuff is awesome too. I'm learning something every day.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Yeah, Civilization does a lot of teaching. I've noticed as, I'm watching movies or whatever, I'll see like a landmark in the background. I think recently I saw Uluru in one of the movies that I was
yeah.
watching. I don't remember what it was. And I was like, oh, I know that from Civ. This wasn't a thing I knew existed before.
I was very nearly an art history minor in college, and
cool.
People kept telling me, this will be useless. This will be useless, Kat. Like, you're never going to use this. And lo and behold,
And
I
yet.
use it every day.
Nice. All right, so let's jump in. We have some pictures here. There we go. All right, the many faces of Coupe. So we just talked to Ed and Dennis about the Maori and Coupe and how we were picking all of these leaders and civs. So how is the art team involved in choosing the leaders?
Well, animation comes in a little bit later, generally, but on the concept side, we are super nosy and super involved super early, because we always we want to paint like the coolest thing, like the most interesting look to us. So we're always pressing the designers, like, when are we gonna get when are we gonna know who we're painting? When are we gonna know? So we can be a little bit aggressive, and like kind of like leaning around doors, like, hey guys, have you decided on our leaders? So that's pretty much how that goes there.
Nice.
And in terms of practicality, though, we always want to push the visual look. So we try to get like a good spread of different silhouettes and different visual looks for the leaders in the game. So
Right.
just like the gameplay side and the design side wants to have a variety of gameplay types and options, we as the art team, and particularly on concept art, we want to have a good variety of visual options as well.
Okay. Yeah, I remember you said something when we were rehearsing the other day about how when you're in the art meeting and you look around the room, you're like, okay, I want this leader lineup to be at least as visually diverse as the people in this room.
Yeah.
So you're a little on the shorter side. We've
yeah.
got one of our technical animators is very tall.
Yeah.
And it brings life to the world, I think, to have that kind of variety.
Yeah, I want to get a lot of good shapes in there, and that was always visually exciting to work on.
Yeah, for sure.
And exciting for our animation team, too.
Oh yeah, I mean you can't wait. Like we really can't wait until we hear who the leaders are, and then just to see what they look like, and then just to see what your concepts look like and how we're gonna move them. It's so exciting
Nice.
when it finally gets to us. Yeah.
All right, so do you guys, when you're talking to the designers, do you have any specific concerns that you're bringing to the table with, the way that these guys are being drawn? Do you have concerns about like how they can be animated, and what's that give there?
I mean,
I like
definitely.
the side eye that just happened between you two.
So basically, yeah. So Coupe is a great example because concept team, we're always pushing for the most extreme silhouette we can get, or like the coolest looking clothes, and sometimes that's a conflict with what animation wants and needs. So, for example, Coupe, we had a first rounds of sketches where we just had like more wild feather cloaks on him. They were like really long. And then animation, they wanted it to be really expressive, to be able to do these really wild, bold gestures. And both of those are conflicting needs visually.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of discussions and back and forth about where we wanted to arrive there, because if we let concept steer everything, then we're looking for like the prettiest flat image on the page, and then animation is looking to make it move. So.
Yeah, we also don't want to kill our technical animators also, because
Oh yeah.
there's like a time and place for certain things, and we definitely all want it to look as great as it can, you know, as dynamic as it can, but also we don't want to like just be too expensive of any one character, you know.
Right.
Yeah, like for Coupe's feather cloak, like concept, we're like, put all the feathers in it, everywhere, feather, just a ton of feathers. And then our technical animators are like, well, we got to make sure the material doesn't stretch, and then it looks good when it's actually moving. And I think for concept 2, we had all those little tassels on Coupe's robes, and we were like, we want them all to dangle like individually.
And they do.
And then for like the grass,
Yep.
and technical animators just like.
So when you were designing Coupe from the concept point of view, you know, this is a semi-mythical being. You know, we don't have photographs of him. So how did you even start like designing like what his face would be like and what his body would be like?
Well, we are kind of deep in the research pit very frequently for the first week or more on the concept side. We do a lot of reading and a lot of looking at visual material, and just visual research as well as written research. Feels like we're going into a little bit of a library black hole for a little while. And then we begin to look at things like carvings, motifs, as well as modern human beings' faces and all the like. And it's really about creating a compelling visage that serves the mood that we want to put forth. For instance, with Coupe, we really wanted to get the feeling that he's the kind of person that you would feel confident jumping on a boat and like following him across the ocean, like no questions asked. Like I wanted to really project confidence with this guy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you know, for animation, I looked at a lot of documentaries, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube and all of, and you know, whatever media out there, you know, about the Maori. And since he is kind of a mythical character, like he's like this ideal embodiment, you know, of the Maori people. And so there's this one documentary in that show, like when you welcome someone onto your community in the Maori culture, like you have to, they're always on guard, they're always, you know, watching you, and they bring a warrior out to greet you, and depending on when they give you like an offering, depending on how the visitor accepts the gift, can either be like an act of, you know, aggression or friendliness, and they're always watching, and so you always have to be on guard, and it's a very, it's, I don't know, it's fascinating.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I do have more pictures. There we go. Okay, so this is Coupe in most of his 3D glory. We're missing the Tamoko, but we'll talk about that next. So how much information comes down from design for both of you guys, actually, when you're creating him? Like, will they say, hey, he's going to be more militaristic, and that kind of is something that you guys are thinking about, or do you kind of just go ham?
It really depends on each leader individually in the process. Some we get more information than others. Some we get more specific instructions than others. I think Coupe specifically, design did stress to us that they want the exploratory aspect to be impacted. And so, therefore, the visual decisions I made to make him appear as trustworthy as possible and as confident as possible were tying into that gameplay. So,
Nice.
Yeah, with animation, we definitely want to make sure that we're interpreting what the designers had in mind, you know, through the lines and just what his character is, that we're staying faithful to that, because that has, you know, implications to the gameplay and everything. And so we definitely want to keep, you know, in touch with the designers to make sure we're, you know, achieving their vision.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so this image actually shows it really well. His necklace I think is one of the most iconic parts of Coupe in Civilization 6. I didn't know what it was or what it represented until yesterday when we were talking. So tell us about this necklace, because it's really cool.
Well, I wanted to give a little bit of a nod to the Coupe story and fighting the great octopus. So the necklace is supposed to represent the octopus that he fights, but it's heavily abstracted because I didn't want it to be really on the nose or obvious.
Right.
Just kind of a subtle nod, and we played with different options like putting patterns in his robe or putting something at his belt. But honestly, that goes into like the structure of our game consideration is that most players, when they're looking at Civ leaders, are looking like chest up.
Yeah.
And if we put really important design elements like down lower, then it's likely that the camera's going to cut them off. So we wanted to put it like right front and center because it's important to the story.
Nice. All right, now I'm going to ask you guys a question that I saw come through Twitch chat. So apologies if neither of you are involved with this. I think it might usually be the modelers, but many, if not all, of our Civilization leaders have the Firaxis logo hidden on them somewhere. Do either of you have anything to do with that?
Actually, we do not predetermine where that goes in concept. The modelers are in charge of that, and the modelers they can like cackle with glee when
Yeah, they're clever.
Yes.
Totally.
Because a lot of those really more subtle things are best conveyed through material back and forth and through communication. Of course, if any of you guys wanted me to, I could sit down and do like a highly detailed painting of exactly how light falls on something, but it's just not practical in a production environment. So a lot of that can be decided with conversations or a back and forth with the modelers themselves.
Nice.
But it's primarily the modelers who are driving that.
Okay.
And sometimes they won't tell us.
Yeah, I don't
we
know
have
where
to
they
find out
all
where
are.
it is.
Oh yeah, we have to find them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever found any in like weird places when you're animating?
I'm trying to think. Like sometimes we have the textures all on and off, and I can't remember exactly. I'm like having a hard time like drawing a
Okay,
blank right
no
now.
worries,
I think
no
that-
worries.
was
I'm
it
putting
the
you on the
umbrella?
spot.
I think like did Wilhelmina have one in the umbrella or something? I can't remember. There was some really
Something like that, yeah.
She did, yeah.
yeah. It was awesome. I don't know. Every time we see it, we're just like,
I
oh
like
my god.
I
it's
like
there.
Laurier's.
Yeah, on his silk.
Like the subtle pattern. Yeah.
It took me a while to find that
Yeah.
one. All right, hop to the next one. I'm really bad at doing PowerPoints. I apologize. But these images are important. So I love this one. This is the Tomoko as designed by the Tomoko artist, Katz Meier. So we don't always get to work with like people that are experts on these cultures.
Yeah.
But Tomoko is a thing that this man does. What was that process? I don't know if you guys were involved in that, but do you know kind of what went on and how it came to be?
It was really a push by our art director, JJ. Although we really like wanted to get it right ourselves, we just don't have the expertise, and we didn't want to attempt something that required that expertise when we ourselves do not have it.
Right.
So JJ really said like, we're either going to do it right or we're not going to do it at all. So props to his awesome leadership there. Fortunately, like we're part of a larger team ecosystem, so another part of our team was able to arrange that for us. And to get in contact with him and everything. And when he said yes, like we saw like the email and we're like, oh my God, we're so excited. It was so cool. But although we didn't get to talk to him personally, we were extremely invested in the process, and we were just really excited to see any of the images come through.
Yeah.
And, oh God, it was so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool to be a part of the Civilization team and just kind of bringing these cultures to life, many of which I'm personally unfamiliar with until they come around. And that kind of like authenticity that we strive for is just very cool to me. Because these aren't always, like the Tomoko and the Maori story isn't my story to tell. I'm not a Maori warrior or sailor from many years ago.
Yeah.
So having someone come in and be a part of that can actually bring that culture to the forefront, I think it's cool to be a part of that.
Yeah, we do our research, and I remember I started animating him even before he had that, you know, on his face. And when it came through and we put it on, and I was like, oh man, this is amazing!
Yeah.
Like how much it really affects the animation.
Yeah, we were really
his character.
hoping it would come through, but we didn't know. And we, oh gosh, we were just so excited when it actually did. Yeah, when we actually got to work with him. Yeah.
All right, so next I'm going to pull up a video that I know you're very proud to share with the world.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right, so this is reference video for the Enraged animation for Coupe, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so when I do like these, every time I animate like a leader, we use video reference, and a lot of times we act it ourselves. And so it takes a while for me to get into that mindset, you know, to really, because you can tell like when you're not feeling it. So I had to build up, you know, all of this like passionate energy. And this was after, you know, I do a lot of research also. I had to be sure I'm as authentic, you know, as I can be. And so this was pretty much taken from like a haka from like the rugby team of New Zealand. And so, yeah, I had to really get into it.
Yeah.
And there's all these different versions of this too, where sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and this seemed to kind of to work. And so, yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
I want to play it a few more times.
Okay.
So if we can just cut back. Oh, there, it's still up there.
All of our leaders, whenever I see them emote, I can't stop seeing images of my coworkers doing the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted to work on Coupe. Like, I just saw him and was just like, that's the leader I want to work on.
I love it. So are you into like acting and theater at all?
Well, you know, it's funny. I started doing improv classes here in Baltimore, and I really think it helped me a lot. I started taking improv just because I was really stiff when I was recording myself doing stuff, and now I think it's helped me a lot being, you know, very very present, not being as self-conscious, and just going for it. And so yeah, it's helped a lot. And yeah, I mean, I took an acting for animators class in grad school. And all those experiences helped a lot with helping me, you know, form characters.
Yeah, I thought you did a really good job of bringing this to life, and I should have gotten more videos because they're all really great.
We sit in those art meetings and we critique all of them, and I know we have a very serious job, but it's an entire meeting of watching your coworkers on video like, move around. We crack a smile every so.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they see when they laugh, it's like a good thing.
Yeah, you want like some level of emotions from your first audience.
All right, so you did say that the haka was actually very important to you because you had come into contact with this earlier in your life, right?
I didn't really know much about hakas, you know, earlier on in my life. When I was in college, that's when I first heard about it. And so my roommate was on the soccer team, and one of his fellow soccer teammates was from Tonga, and that's another Polynesian kingdom. And they do hakas also. And so before he taught the team the haka, and my roommate was telling me, you know, how intense it was, how, you know, it was great. And I was like, well, why don't you show me what it looked like? He's like, I can't just show you what it looks like. It's really intense. It's a lot of emotion, and it's really like you can't just show it just like that. So I'm like, okay, this is a serious thing, and I don't want to, you know, misrepresent this like at all. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so next we've got the stepped animation. I don't know if a lot of people know just the process of how we animate our leaders, so I want to just talk about how that's done. You know, we had the visual reference at first, but that's different than mocap.
Yeah, exactly. Like we shoot like so much video reference of ourselves until we get exactly what we want, and then we start posing them out in sequence like this. And so we do it this way. I think a lot of you know, animation studios that they work this way. Like this has actually changed the process, the way that I animate, because I used to do a lot of mocap before, and now you know, I'm doing a lot of keyframing here. Which is awesome. It's like every animator's dream is to like do like really emotive, you know, keyframing animations from by hand.
It's so cool.
And so in this case, yeah, so we started out doing just the still poses in sequence, and then we really analyze them to make, before we move further, before we start polishing it more.
And even from a concept standpoint, when we're designing these leaders, we're designing them to be larger than life, a little bit exaggerated, a little bit stylized. So a stylized human, you can stretch a little bit further than a normal human and it won't look weird. And often our art style, we are deliberately working to support more expressive animation. So that's some of the thinking we're going into from a concept standpoint too.
Yeah, like we're trying to create things that are like better than life, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
And it's so great. I think like with just the way that we just build our characters, like with like the exaggerated realism on it, I think it affords us a lot of fun and a lot of just great fun work that we do.
Yeah, it must be kind of strange, or at least a little bit challenging in some ways, when certain people, certain leaders have just reference and others we've never seen, you know?
Yeah. I honestly, from a concept standpoint, we find ones that exist further back in history or in the realm of myth a little bit easier to visually design because we have a little bit more freedom. Whereas people like John Curtin, Teddy Roosevelt, Wilfrid Laurier, like there's video reference of these folks. So there's a certain visual expectation players have that is very, very set in stone. So you really have to nail those likenesses. And that's much more difficult to hit because people have like a certain picture in their head, whereas with someone who there's only like some stone carving of that is extremely stylized, we have a little bit more freedom to play around.
Yeah, that's cool. Does that ever like affect how you're animating things?
Yeah,
Are there mannerisms you can find?
Yeah, totally. I mean, if there's video of like of the leaders from real life, it helps a lot, you know. And then we can just take it, we can exaggerate, and we'll notice little things, and we'll bring it, you know, put much more focus, you know, on certain things, and we look for gestures that kind of personify them. But if we don't, like with the case of Coupe, he's almost like a mythical character, and so like we went pretty big. And yeah, and then so we were creative with it, but we also try to stay true to like, you know, just the way people would act in like the Maori culture. Yeah.
So who's your favorite leader to animate?
By name or what kind, or I mean,
either.
I mean, Coupe was fantastic. I mean, I just had so much fun, and partly because he was so expressive. I think a lot of our leaders tend to be a little stoic, you know, a little serious, and I
they are
think,
leaders.
They are leaders, and they got to the position, you know, for not being, you know. I
don't know. I like
hysterical,
Eleanor is like turning around animation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something great in like all the different leaders.
Well, and like Eleanor, like we don't usually show like the back of a leader too.
Right. Yeah. That's
so like because the animators had her turn around, like we really had to highly consider like what the designs on the back of her are. So the animation dictates the design.
Yeah.
And the it's really back and forth.
So did you have to do extra concept work for Eleanor?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah. Because she's got the two different versions.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna pop this ahead to the final Coupe. This is how he shows in the game. And he looks amazing.
He looks so cool.
It was fun. I mean,
he's so happy.
Yeah, I mean, I did animate this, but like, you know, you have your, like the whole animation team was here, you know, doing critiques and like helping each other out, and you know, it's definitely a result of like, you know, a whole team of people.
Oh,
but
yeah.
really, I had a lot of fun just working on this character, because even his body type was different from like a lot of our other characters.
Oh, it's just like really fun to be a little bit more individualized with folks. Like we don't often in video game dev have the opportunity to customize sculpts so much.
Oh yeah, that's
or to
true.
go as wide with a range of types. And so like a lot of game systems, they have to fit armor on like the same body over and over. And so with Civ, where we get to do each leader individually, it's wonderful to be able to have more freedom to just go wild. It's really cool.
And it's really cool for me when the animators are referencing those different wardrobes and they're walking around the office with weird props.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
I
got
think
lots of
that's
props.
great.
I think we have like a foam mace and like a bunch of like fake swords.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had a coworker that made a crown out of cardboard and
Yeah.
like all kinds of stuff. We had dangling things from it, you know.
Well, yeah, you need
Yeah.
to like know where everything's gonna be.
Oh yeah, it really helps like your performance too. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming and talking about Coupe. I hope everyone out there enjoyed hearing about it. We've had a lot of fun talking about it. You guys are so passionate, and it really shows in the game. Like, all of these leaders are beautiful. So thank you so much to you guys and the rest of the art team for, bringing yourselves to the table. And
Happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
cool. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. We're going to switch out and come to our next group. Next, we're talking to Jeff Knorr and Roland Rizzo, two of our composers for Civilization 6. Civilization 6 Gathering Storm is coming your way in just a few short hours tonight at midnight. So thank you guys so much, and stay tuned. And we're back. Hello, Civ fans. So our next segment, I know there's a lot of people that are very excited about this. We're going to be talking about the music of Civilization VI Gathering Storm. So I have in studio with me Jeff Knorr and Roland Rizzo, both composers for Civilization VI. So thank you guys so much for coming and talking to us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, there's so many people that are just very excited about hearing about the soundtrack, the different instruments, things that have gone into it, because it really does bring the whole game to life. So, again, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I guess just, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Roland, do you want to start?
Okay, I'm Roland Rizzo, and then the question over here says, how many games have you worked on? And so
We're supposed to pretend
to
that we
pretend
don't
there's
have
no
reminders.
questions on the monitor, but yeah, so it's, to be safe, I'll say in the vicinity of around 75. It could be, it's probably higher, but, you know, we'll be safe. And it's been a long 36 years, so.
All right, so can you now name every
No,
one?
no, no. I have the notes someplace. But
Nice.
and you go.
I'm Jeff Knorr, and I've been working on games for about 10 years or so not quite as many games as Roland over here. Probably
But it's all
15 to
quality
20
work.
or so
Yeah.
that I've worked on. Yeah.
Awesome. So when you guys are getting started with a new Civilization game, Gathering Storm, what is the first thing that like comes down to you and that you need to like start researching or diving into? Is it like the civs?
As soon as we get to civs, we can get started on researching their traditional and folk instruments, and then we go and we research their traditional music if we can find any snippets. And we do that because Jeff tries to find actual ethnic musicians to record this, but if we can't, then we have to try to simulate it as closely as possible. So we do all of that research, you know. Take it.
Exactly. Yeah, it all starts with that list of civs. Once we get the list, we just start researching, and a lot of times it's music that we've never heard or we don't know about yet. So we have to learn about it first, and hopefully find performers who can help teach us too.
That's what I was going to ask
yeah.
next. Like, are you guys experts on every culture in the
No.
world and their instruments? And
No, but that's what's so great about the job. What I love so much about working on Civ is learning about all these different musical, ethnomusicology is a cool field.
Absolutely.
It's just, you know.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we just talked about the Maori and how Coupe came to life, how he came to be, and you know, part of that is the music. So I want to pull up a little bit of music for us to listen to while we chat, and it should be going. And so this here, Jeff, this was your baby, correct?
Yes,
One
I
of.
worked on the music for
Okay.
the Maori. Yeah.
All right. So what can you tell us about the Maori tracks?
Well, the Maori tracks are based on a genre in Maori culture called kapa haka. So this is not just music. This is dance and hand movements and songs, and also the haka, which is
Yeah.
like known as a challenge song. And so these groups actually will put together a whole suite of these different types of songs and movements, and up to 40 minutes long, and give performances of them.
Oh, nice.
So, of course, I had to learn about what this was and how to incorporate it into the soundtrack to be a good underscore for the Maori in the game. And really the only way that could happen was to find an actual group. You just cannot fake this sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I found one. There was a group in Vancouver of
Not too far.
of Maori people. They were from New Zealand. They were just expats living in Vancouver, and they wanted to get together and sing their songs and do hakas, and formed a group in Vancouver. And they actually tour around and sing, and
That's awesome.
and I think they were in DC not too long ago. So it was great. I was able to work with them and actually record a real Kabahaku group singing some of the songs and singing the most well-known haka, Kamate. And then there's another haka that shows up in the ancient era. So there's a little bit of everything that we included for the Maori. Yeah.
So what was the process of kind of going from the ancient theme to like the atomic theme, and how do you kind of figure what's going to go into each one?
I usually like to think of the ancient era as kind of being the tradition or the genre in a very pure, unaltered presentation.
Original format is
So we try not to do too much to that. Sometimes we might slow things down just to give it a more mysterious type feel for the ancient era to kind of fit the era. But generally, we just want it to be the tradition kind of in its pure sense, in its pure way that it would be performed. And then we can start to add other things, add other elements to build on for the other eras. So you get that sense as your civilization is building and developing and changing, the music is also building and changing and whatnot. So there's a pretty kind of standardized way that we've done it. So we add some medieval strings in the medieval era, then we add the orchestra in the industrial era, and then we take that orchestra arrangement and add additional electronics and percussion for the atomic era. So getting that all to work when you're dealing with something like the haka versus a love song, which is the other part of the main theme for the Maori, a song called Pokari Kari Ana, is pretty tricky because how do you get, the haka is so emotional, it's so expressive. To Western ears, it might even sound just like they're shouting, but it's actually very musical. How do you incorporate that with
Something that's
basically Western instruments and something melodic? And I tried to go off of the text actually of the haka. It speaks of, I won't go into too much of the story, but you should go and read about the story of Kamate because it's really cool. But part of the lyrics are, it is death, it is death. Basically, the person who composed it thought he was going to die, but then he says, it is life, it is life. I think I'm going to live now. And so you get this kind of pull of death versus life, and eventually life kind of conquering death. So I wanted, you hear the haka and you think, oh, maybe that's negative, maybe it's war music. But I actually wanted the haka section to sound victorious.
Yeah.
So musically, I tried to bring that out with what I underscored underneath the haka there.
Nice. I think we're actually having a little bit of a sound issue right now with the music. So we're going to take a quick break because I don't want us to be talking about music without music. So please stand by, give us just a minute, and we'll be back up and running. guys are. Do you want to check the... And we're back. And hopefully with music now. So, okay. I love being live. It's great. I've missed you guys. Oh boy. So Friday, cool. All right, so let's move on to another Civ, which I think is particularly cool. Roland, I believe this was one that you took the helm on.
Yeah, this is the Phoenicia music, which is based off of the translations and interpretations of a cuneiform tablet. And they were done by Anne Kilmer, Marcel Duchesne-Guillemin, and M.L. West.
Nice.
And the text for the hymn was on the top half of the tablet. On the bottom half, they interpreted it as durations and intervals, but as we talked about it, it had to be all guesses because no one knows even what their scales sounded like, or so it's, you know, we said, you guessed, we'll follow along. So
this is the first time that this Phoenician music has been performed and played.
Well, parts of it I actually used in DLC for Civ 5.
Oh, okay.
Because Babylon was one of the civs in that Jeff was off on vacation, so so I did that DLC, and the leader was Nebuchadnezzar, and it was, you know, Babylon, so I used a piece of it for that.
Was it the same hymn?
Yes. Well,
Oh,
there's
cool.
that's the only thing we could find from
there's-
Phoenicia. So
The whole collection, they found this whole collection, and there's one in particular, number 6, that is nearly complete. So it's considered like the earliest notated complete piece of music, but we have no idea.
you still
what it
no
sounded
idea
like.
what it sounded like.
Right, yeah.
or what they turned into notes is actually what it sounded like. You know,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, but we do have some instruments in this that are very
From
old.
the era, yes.
Yeah.
So we used ney flute, which goes back, 4,000 years. Duduk, which is a double reed instrument, which is also very old, very old, distant relative of the oboe, and then a lyre for the stringed, which is like a big U frame with, the strings in it for
That
plucking
is the
and
first
strumming.
instrument that you have said that I recognize.
Oh, okay. And then, hand drums and other things, but
Yeah.
we picked everything to sound as old as possible,
Yeah,
So.
it's a really beautiful track, and it's one of my favorites in the game. I kind of want to just lay there at night and light some candles, just put on a face mask and do self-care. But for anyone out there who's interested, there's some really cool photographs online that you can look up of.
You can see the tablet.
Yeah, the tablet itself.
And you can look up the instruments too.
And we do actually have pictures of a couple of these instruments that I hadn't heard of. None for Phoenicia, but for our next one, we have Mali. So what is this here, Jeff? I think you worked with this guy.
That
right?
is a kora,
Okay.
a 21-string kora, and that is very common in West African music, very characteristic of the griot tradition or Jali tradition, which is basically it's passed from family to family.
Oh, cool.
And they're not just musicians, they're storytellers and kind of historians for West African culture.
Yeah.
And they would pass this down, children would pass it on to their children. And so the performer that I worked with is actually a descendant, Amadou Kouyaté, who lives here in Baltimore.
Oh, cool.
Is actually a descendant, and his father and grandfather, great, going back 150 years or something like that, all musicians.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is this instrument that he brought in, whose name I've already forgotten?
Amadu.
Amadu.
Yes.
Is his Amadu one that has been in the family for that long?
I don't think so. I think he actually builds them.
Oh, wow, cool.
So I think I didn't ask him specifically about this instrument that we're seeing here, but my guess is that he actually built that himself because he does build them.
That's awesome.
Which I think that is also passed down.
Nice.
How to build them.
Yeah, for sure. So in addition to this instrument here, there's also the kora. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the kora, yeah.
And that is 21 strings?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm just like saying facts about instruments without knowing anything about them. But I don't know, it seems very cool to me. So something that you had mentioned, I think this is the theme that's playing right now, is we've got some electric guitar going with these
Yeah. So
instruments.
in the atomic era, we bring in some electric guitar work, which in a weird way, you don't always think that you take a very ancient instrument like the kora and it just worked. Like it sounded so, just the vast expanse of like African, Saharan kind of West Africa and with these long sustained electric guitar notes, it still sounded very West African, even for all the way in the atomic era. So
I mean, I'm a fan of adding electric guitar to anything, really. So, but yeah, that's great. All right, who do we have next? Oh, did I switch too much? Okay. Is this right? Yeah, Hungary. Okay. So, Hungary. Now, we actually got to have fun with this soundtrack the other day because Carl and Ed went head-to-head in a multiplayer game. I don't know if either of you saw this, but Ed was playing as Hungary, and he was just kind of moseying along, as the music is doing right now. And then very suddenly, his arm just blossomed into this great, powerful force and came crashing down upon
Poor Carl.
poor Carl. So Roland, this was one of your pieces that you worked on, right?
Yeah, this one was fun because it consists of two different tunes. I have to look at the notes for the first one to pronounce it. I'm sorry, Hungarian fans, but it's called Hej Dunaral Fuja Gel, which is about a wind blowing down the Danube, making the poor people cold. And then the other one is called Siniga Siniga, which translates to Titmouse, Titmouse, a children's tune. And the first one was collected by Bartók in 1907. And when in this piece was written in 3 sections. The first section is the upper strings playing the folk tune in a moderate tempo. And in the lower strings, I tried to incorporate some Bartókian sounding dissonances like in his orchestral music. But then when you get to the middle section, I made it sound like a Oompa beer festival kind of band, that plays. And then the last section is a peasant dance. And it's a fast tempo, and that's when we incorporate the cymbalon, which is the Hungarian national instrument, and it's their version of a hammered dulcimer kind of instrument. And then there's also a clarinet solo, which is popular in a lot of peasant dances. And then it builds to the frenzied, ending, which speeds up all the way to the end. And Jeff, while he was there in Prague recording the industrial music, he can tell you about the size of this cymbalon.
Oh yeah, in the picture here, right?
In the picture you see the cymbalon player.
It's big. I mean, you can see it's almost like a
whole
small grand piano that is hit with hammers.
So it's kind of like the piano without the keys in a way, right?
Yeah, it's very similar. And there actually are dampers on it too, so that's similar to a piano as well. So as the strings are ringing, he can dampen them to mute them again. So yeah, it's very much like a piano. that's struck with hammers.
Nice. So what music instruments do you guys play, if anything? I assume something.
Yeah, I played.
I know you're in a band.
Woodwind
right?
instruments. No, I'm in a couple of orchestras, but
Orchestras.
I
Apologies.
used to be in bands, but I didn't have practice time for everything, so I gave up the bands to focus on the orchestra music. So with them, I play the clarinet.
Okay, cool. What about you?
So my best instrument is cello,
Okay.
but I also play piano and guitar, bass guitar, and some other random stuff like
Nice.
that. Anything strings
Yeah.
related.
Is this the third part, the peasant
Yes.
dance?
Yeah, and we already went past the clarinet section, which Pete Murray joked that I wrote it for myself.
Yeah, this part, it gets faster and faster and faster.
To the end, yeah.
This was the perfect theme for the
Ed beating
for
up
Ed's
on the
army
crowd,
just
yes.
slowly popping up with
That's
all
awesome.
all the levied units just like here I am, here I am, here I am. Let's go to war. All right, who do we got next? I think it's Canada.
This is
Yes. Okay, so this is the Canada medieval theme, right? I didn't notice what you were talking about until yesterday. So I'm not even going to try to say these words. So I'm going to leave that to you.
So yeah, in the Canada medieval piece, there's some really cool Quebecois foot stomping footwork, which is, I probably don't even pronounce it correctly. I believe it's podorythmy, or something like that.
Okay, that sounds good.
yeah,
Sounds like a
so-
word.
Which is this foot percussion, which is, as far as I'm aware, really pretty unique to Quebecois culture. So you'll hear the most basic rhythm is your heel, and then toe toe. So you get heel toe toe. So dun, 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 but I can't do it very
Let me try
fast. So
Heel, toe, toe.
yeah. So now imagine playing
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
like going like this
yeah.
really fast and playing
Playing
fiddle,
instrument at the
and
same
that's
time.
what they do.
Okay. And that's what we're hearing.
Yeah, yeah. So you'll hear that in there alongside a few tunes. There's Vive la Canadienne, which was kind of almost like Quebec's national anthem of sorts. Then there's a tune called The Crooked Stovepipe, which is a fun little Northeast Canadian tune. And then there's so many different traditions in Canadian music, and I figured the best way to tie them all together would to just bring in "O Canada" at the end. So that's
Yeah.
what you'll hear. But yeah, the foot tapping is in there. There's also the bones. I don't know if you're aware of that instrument. So they take these animal bones.
Oh, it is bones.
It is
Okay,
actually
cool, I'm
literally
in.
bones.
That's awesome.
And they take two of them in their hand, and they have a certain way. It's very similar to spoons, like
Okay,
if you've
yeah,
seen
yeah.
spoons in like Appalachian music. So actually, you can hear it right there, the clicking.
Yep.
That's the bones, and that's also very common in this type of music. So they would take it and just do these intricate clicking type bone rhythms, which interestingly, because it's kind of part of Acadian culture a little bit. The Acadians, you also see this show up in Cajun music, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
Because the Acadians are related. So it's really crazy how all these musical cultures kind of are intertied a little bit.
Yeah. And yet they all really have their own feel.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. All right.
Well,
so,
before you go on to the next
ooh, okay.
one,
What do you got?
this is the medieval piece, but Jeff's industrial version for Canada is gorgeous.
Yeah.
So you've got to hear that if you haven't yet. It's just sweet. Yes.
I had a lot of fun with the putting together a grand kind of arrangement
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
celebrate Canada, basically. So.
Yeah, yeah.
You aren't Canadian, are you?
No, but
Okay.
I have some Canadian friends, and actually, you know, we recorded in Vancouver. I've done some really
cool.
like great Civ recordings with either Canadians or in Canada.
Okay. So it's got a special place
I
in
always
your heart.
like I like working with Canadians and going to Canada to record things. So
Nice.
yeah.
Now, I don't have details on soundtrack releases, but hopefully more information will come out about that soon. But I believe all of these are available to listen to now in some manner, and hopefully officially soon. All right, so next one we got is Sweden. There we go. So what is this instrument here?
So what you're seeing there is a nyckelharpa,
Nyckelharpa.
which basically means key harp.
Okay.
So if you look, you can see the player here. This is our wonderful Renaissance bowed string specialist, Niccolo Seligman, who has played in every single medieval era piece in the game.
Okay.
And he said, hey, I can play nyckelharpa for you too.
Oh, cool.
So he did. So he is, the way that the notes are triggered is by the keys that you're seeing there, which is very different than actually pressing the strings, right? Usually with a violin, you're pressing the actual strings down. Here you're pressing keys instead. So it's a very different instrument to play. It took a while for him to get used to playing, but he did a great job.
It's awesome. And we've got Helen Gar. Is that
Helen Gore.
Helen Gore.
Yes.
Okay. Helen Gore. Swedish drinking song.
Yes.
I'm all in favor of drinking songs being in the game.
Yeah, so this is, it's a really interesting tune I ran across when I was researching tunes. It's basically like their version of a toast.
Oh, okay.
So here in the US, someone gets up and says some words, and then they say, you know, here, here, and we take a drink, and it's in Sweden, they just sing a song. So
that's lovely.
So one of these is Helen Gore,
yeah.
and they'll sing the song, and there's actually a little pause where you can take your drink, like.
Is that in here?
Like cheers. So it's in the industrial and atomic eras. You'll actually hear the pause.
Nice.
And then take the drink and then finish the song.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it.
So it's like a toast. You
Yeah.
Think of that. Yeah.
So how many of this is a question for both of you, of the tracks have you worked on for Gathering Storm that like kind of brought you to new songs, like hearing things that you might not have heard before? Were there any that stuck out to you?
Oh,
all of them?
It's everything. Yeah, everything.
Yeah, the Hungarian songs.
Yeah.
Phoenicia, you know, I mean, no one's heard any of their songs. The Inca music was all, you know, we're not covering it today, but I didn't know any of those either before. So, yeah, it was, every time we work on one of these, we learn a lot of, you know, things.
Yeah, it's always such an adventure,
Yeah.
you know, to dive into these traditions. There's all so rich, and
Yeah,
we're just
what makes it so much fun.
we're
Yeah.
just open to whatever we find.
Awesome. All right, so in addition to the Civ themes, we've also got these little clips of wonders that will play throughout the game. So I included one in here that we're going to show right now, Machu Picchu. I love it. So when you're trying to make a Wonder movie, or the track for a Wonder movie, you've got a really short period of time.
Yes.
And you need to capture like the spirit of this place.
In between 15 and 18 seconds is
Yeah.
what the average. Yeah, so it's quickly, you have to feel that it's, you know, tribal, it's Incan, it's South American, it's in a very short amount of time. So the high flute is a pinquilo, which is from the Andes mountain region. The strummed instrument is a charango, which is also a Andes mountain version of a lute, you know, and then some of the percussion uses a cajon and a bass cajon, and then a hand drum, and then for some flavor, there's a pan flute in there too. So it's like quickly. You have to know right away that it's from that region, you know, so.
Yeah, and I think that you do a really incredible job of just like making it very iconic and just in that 15 to 18 seconds, like, okay, we're here, we're suddenly on Machu Picchu, it's amazing, we're watching it being built, and then we go back into the rest of the tracks.
Yeah. So, yeah, and there's a lot of them too. Wonders, I can't remember since the base game, but there's over 30, I think, now.
I don't know the number offhand,
Yeah.
but yeah. Do you ever have trouble like trying to keep them different from each other? Or are they?
Some of the Middle Eastern ones get tough because, you know, you want to know right away it's Middle Eastern, so there's a style, and then the next Middle Eastern one you do is like, it has to be different, but it still has to be recognizable immediately as Middle Eastern, and, you know, so.
Yeah, one of the tricky things with Middle Eastern is they have many different scales, but the most kind of to Western ears scale that sounds most Middle Eastern is this one called Hijaz. So you tend to write something in Hijaz maqam, and it sounds similar to other things in Hijaz.
Right.
So I think that's what Roland is kind of hinting at. And a lot of the other scales have a lot of microtones, so they might sound kind of strange to people.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's just so many different ways of doing music throughout the world, and they all do have their own unique style. I'm not an expert on it. I was in choir in high school, and I was all right, I guess. But you guys really have brought something to this game that just makes it feel so alive and so real when you're playing. And I know that a lot of the fans really appreciate it.
Cool.
So we've got just a couple more minutes if you guys had anything else you wanted to add and talk about.
No, I'm okay.
I could mention that just the opening movie actually incorporates some interesting elements of the text to Kamate.
Oh, cool.
As well as text from the Epic of Gilgamesh.
I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I'll have to post what the lyrics actually are, but you get it very much kind of historically ties into the game, and also this important epic about natural disasters, which is obviously a big theme of the expansion, tied into the actual underscore to the opening movie there.
Nice.
So, and likewise, you get that, you know, of Kamate, where it is death. You see that that kind of destruction, but it is life. You see humanity coming together and rising above these challenges. So it was almost like I was really glad they chose the Maori, because that haka was such a good fit for rising above challenges, and coming together to celebrate life over death, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, which is a huge theme in the Civilization games, is just overcoming the challenges around you and prospering in some manner.
Yeah.
But awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming and talking to us. Like, I learned a lot. So we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Civilization 6 Gathering Storm is going live tonight at midnight Eastern Standard Time. And check out our social media on Twitter, Civilization. There's a cool contest going on with, before I say the wrong thing, with Intel. There's a CPU giveaway, which is awesome. And Civ is currently free to play on Steam, Civ 6. So check it out, it's a great time. Thank you guys, we'll be back in a minute. And we're back. Hello, Civ fans. Welcome to the final segment of today's pre-Gathering Storm celebration stream. We are about to jump into the Black Death scenario, which I'm very excited to show you guys. I don't think any streamers have shown this. There was a little bit of it in one of the gameplay features videos, but we're gonna dive in and actually play through, hopefully, the whole scenario today. So I am joined today by Dave McDonough, who was the designer for this scenario, and Carl Harrison, who you may remember from his glorious defeat.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you, Sarah.
You're very welcome, Carl. On our Monday live stream. Tuesday. I don't know what day it is anymore. It's been a weird week.
It's been a week, yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna jump in real quick into showing you guys how to get into this scenario, because I don't know how many people play scenarios, know they exist, but it's a really cool way to play a different kind of Civ game.
Right. You can find them here within the single player menu. A lot of the scenarios are playable in multiplayer as well, and you have to go in and there's a drop down at the top of the multiplayer setup for that. But for any of the single player ones, like the Black Death, you come into single player and then scenarios. And there's a whole screen here dedicated to setting those up with a whole list of all the ones that we've come out with. And today we're going to be playing the Black Death.
All right, so Dave, why Black Death?
Oh, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me the opportunity to talk about
Thanks for coming
the scenarios.
and talking about it. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, so I had the opportunity to design the two scenarios that ship with Gathering Storm, this one and War Machine. And both of them are sort of reactions to the feature set and the theme of Gathering Storm from a different perspective. That's really what scenarios do best, is kind of take the idea of the game and twist it to provide a new challenge, maybe a more historically appropriate setting for a player with some unique rules. You know, scenarios in the past have been super famous, like the Civil War or Outback Tycoon, you know, things like that got really kind of off the wall.
I love Outback Tycoon.
Yeah, it's still one of my favorites. For sure. So Gathering Storm is kind of about calamity. It's kind of about the environment and man and the struggle between them. But of the systems that it includes, it does not include disease. It does not include disease or medicine. And so when I had the opportunity to design a scenario, that was what I went to first. I said, you know, if we want to have a great tale to tell about your civilization versus the harsh world, let me tell you a story about an epidemic. And there's none more famous or evocative than the 14th century European Black Death. So I got the opportunity to dive into this history a little bit and sculpt a bunch of unique situations, unique gameplay for Gathering Storm.
Nice. All right, so who can we play as?
So this is 1340s Europe, so you have 4 options. You have Castile, France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire. And here's an example of another thing that sort of makes scenarios special, is I can construct custom gameplay that's beyond the scope of what our normal leader or Civ unique abilities are. So they all have unique powers that are, you know, never before seen in Civ. I know that my preference is usually to play as Castile, which is they have a special ability where they can spend faith to give their units double moves. But I think today, for the best demo, we're going to show off Carl's favorite, which is France.
Yes.
And their papal leadership. You want to talk a little bit about why you like France?
Sure. France is really great because they get an extra wildcard slot in their government. Most of the civilizations get only 2 wildcard slots, regardless of what civ you pick. But France has the papacy at Avignon during this period. And so you can pay faith to have a 3rd wildcard policy or policy slotted in as a wildcard. That's really powerful, I think. It works very well in this scenario. France is also centrally located on the continent, obviously, so it'll allow us to see a lot of the surrounding gameplay. And France is locked in war, with England, because during this time they were in the 100 Years' War. And while there wasn't a lot of combat happening during the Black Plague, they still were considered at war with each other, and that's the case here too. So we'll get to maybe go into England a little bit and do some pillaging, so that should be fun.
All right, so yeah, let's get started with what the point of this scenario is. What are we trying to do here?
Yeah, so what Carl was just mentioning about some of the gameplay features drawn from the real story of France during the period, that's the agenda of a scenario, is to give you a little bit of a mix of the tell your own story civ and historical reenactment. So historically, what happened after the end of the Black Plague was it accelerated the end of sort of the medieval feudal world. It accelerated urbanization, maybe sowed the seeds for some of the Renaissance, Industrial Revolution, new kinds of attitudes towards labor and trades. So in this scenario, your goal is simply to survive the ravages of the plague long enough for your civ to kind of limp towards that new world. And so that's counted in the scenario by completing either the technology tree or the civics tree, which are totally unique for this scenario. So if you pop one of those open, Carl.
I can definitely do that.
Yeah. So there's only 7 techs and 8 civics.
Okay.
And they're all specific. All of the things that they unlock are unique. And when you start the scenario, you might be fooled into thinking that this will be quite easy because they add up to far less in turns than you have to play. You have 85 turns. But as we will see, those numbers are deceptive. Your civilization is not going to continue to function at peak capacity for very long in this scenario.
No, I played this the other day for the first time and didn't quite realize what I was getting into before I did. I was like, oh, I got to prep for the live stream. I'll just play a quick little game of Black Death without paying too much attention to what was going on. And I died in a horrible, horrible fashion.
Yeah. You must learn through pain and then give it another try. That's another thing I love about scenario design is it forces you off of your tried and true strategies. You know, the things that every Civ player takes for granted as to what's good don't necessarily hold true in a scenario. You know, an Outback Tycoon, you can't fight even if you want to. And in Black Death, you cannot win everything. You cannot progress along all channels simultaneously. You really have to focus and then sort of accept the loss where it's going to happen and just sort of dodge the punches enough that you can make it across the finish line. And it distorts the way you play. Like, Carl, you're already doing a few unconventional things with where you're placing your districts.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, people in chat are asking, why are you putting campuses?
Why are you doing it wrong, Carl?
So, you were explaining that you have to sort of do science or culture. You can't focus on both. You have to pick one or the other because you're not going to be able to finish the scenario otherwise. So I've decided to go with science. So we're putting campuses all over the place. And I'm not putting them in normal adjacency spots to get those +1 bonuses. Down here, I did in a mountain region because that +4 here was just too good to pass up. But otherwise, I'm not putting them in normal spots because I have an advantage in that I've played this before. I know what's coming up. I am a little bit. But we have the Walled Quarter District here is going to be our first tech unlocked on castles. And this gets an additional adjacency. That's a little bit of a tongue twister there.
Additional adjacency.
Additional adjacency for every single theater square, holy site, commercial hub, and campus. So I'm putting my campuses sort of around those spots where I plan on placing my walled quarters so that I can maximize those adjacencies later. So, for example, up here with Paris, I put the campus here instead of right here where there was a +1. I will still get that for having a triangle of districts, but it will be a triangle with the walled quarter, which will then boost off of both of those as well. So that's why there's some odd placement happening here.
And actually, someone brought this up before we could bring it up in chat, asking, what are modders going to find here?
Oh, lots. So I had 2 agendas when making the scenarios for Gathering Storm. One was to really produce some flavorful scenarios for this very flavorful expansion.
Which you did.
Which I did. I hope so. I hope the community enjoys them.
Yeah.
And the other was to stretch the legs of the modding system. Now, our modding tools are, some of them are sort of just development tools only that can be accessed by the community. Like, for instance, World Builder. There are some people in the modding community who know how to turn that on. It hasn't been sort of officially released yet. I don't know what the timetable is for that. But it's a tool you can find in the shipping build that I used to develop the map that you see here. But most of the gameplay is in, I would say, standard modding approaches of the script files and the XML files. So when you out there buy Gathering Storm and you go into the mod folder, you can read all of the script files that run the Black Death. You can see how the plague system was architected and how it's implemented. And from that, there are a million little gems on what kind of power the modding system has, or the scenario system has, I should say. And that you can use to make gameplay every bit as radical as this, if not more so.
Nice. All right, so Carl, I just saw you are dropping some holy sites now.
Yeah, so one thing that you do a lot in this scenario is purchasing with both gold and faith. And you can purchase everything with faith just like you can with gold. So both of those yields are going to be very important for us because production is going to be so low, we may not be able to build things normally. So I am making sure to get these districts placed now rather than going for my libraries, for example. Hopefully I'll be able to purchase those later because when the Black Plague comes through, as you might imagine, population is going to drop And the number of districts you can build is based on your current population. So once that happens, once the population goes down, I will no longer be able to build new districts. So I'm making sure to get those up and running as fast as possible.
Now, it's telling you, because there's great farmland there, to build some farms, but that's not the best idea in this scenario,
It
right?
is not. You want to maximize your yields if possible. So I'm making sure to improve all of the resources that I can that are within 3 tiles of cities so that they can be worked. Because you're just not going to have the population to work tiles normally. So the better your yields are on individual tiles, the better off you'll be in the scenario.
Okay. And to clarify, because there's a couple of questions in chat right now, there's currently no plague on the map.
Right.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. The so under all difficulties up through, I believe, King, the plague comes in 2 waves. In all cases, it starts on turn 5. Up.
Here we go.
Look at the devil. So another thing that I
Now
was
we
able to
have
do in this scenario is introduce a lot of scripted events. Everything in the scenario is procedural. So the plague's appearance is key to turn 5, but where it appears is procedural. How it moves is semi-random. And there's 2 to 3 waves, depending on your difficulty level. So the plague always starts in a port city. That's your historical character. And in this case, Avignon was the origin point for Karl's France. But if you notice, I'll tell you what, comment on the Plague Doctor first, because everybody loves that infamous beak-faced stuff of nightmares. The art team was practically gleeful when I told them they get to model Plague Doctors and flagellants for the Black Death scenario. So the Plague Doctor is one of your first scenario unique units. Modders out there, you can see how it's implemented in XML. You can do everything that I did and then some, except of course have the benefit of the Civ art team on your side. So Karl's plague started in Avignon. If you notice on the map, every city that's not one of the 4 major powers is a free city. We're sort of twisting that system a little bit to make them kind of isolated, neutral cities. They will also act as vectors for the plague. So at the same time that Karl's outbreak occurred, some number of outbreaks occurred everywhere else around Europe, and those will all act as sort of seed points for the plague to spread across.
They're all port cities, right?
It always starts on the port when a wave begins, and after that it spreads overland, much like it did historically. So it'll go faster along roads and through rural improvements like farms and plantations. It'll go slower through hills and won't go through mountains. So in fact, if you want an easy time of it, play the Holy Roman Empire. They're secluded by the Alps a little bit and have a couple of sheltered cities that'll be safe for a while.
Yeah.
If you want to play on hard mode, play as England. So the plague, every plot has a chance to catch the plague. The plague will sweep across the land. Every plot will be plague infested for some number of turns. While infested, it cannot be worked or developed, and if it's a city, it cannot build. Any unit that ends its turn in the plague tile suffers damage. Essentially, it is just a wave of suffering that's going to bring your civilization to its knees and stop everything.
Just a wave of suffering.
Yeah, you cannot avoid it. You can't get out of the way of it. All you can do is just sort of hunker down and try to pick up the pieces when it goes by.
All right, so tell me, why is this wave of suffering fun?
Well, I mean, depends on your perspective. I think that scenarios can do fun things like this. They can take the sort of traditional everything is always getting better, endless progress attitude of Civ and kind of turn it on its head.
Yeah.
And say you will achieve a victory of a different type, a challenge of a different type, where your goal was to outmaneuver, outlast the plague. Not to end it. Like medicine at this time was never going to stop it.
No.
But you can survive it, and you can survive it and find enough style that you can be the better for it on the other side, which is ultimately what happened historically. And so designing for decay is sort of my perspective on this scenario, is always a tricky proposition. This one gets compared to the fall of Rome scenario where you had to make Rome progressively worse as barbarians were knocking it down.
Right.
And that one gets a lot of love because it's funny, because it's different, because it's kind of wacky. It's refreshing. If you're used to playing Civ and you know how to beat it, you're a solid player, you can try something like this and really get sort of a different taste in your mouth. And it may not be for everyone. Like, the impression that everybody is dying and that your cities are suffering may not be your cup of tea.
It's a bit dark.
It is.
Which is why I love it.
Yeah.
Well, but like Civilization is usually very aspirational and very optimistic. Gathering Storm has got a little bit of darkness sort of flavor to it, right? And so I think the scenario is perfectly suited to the people who are going to be fans of this expansion.
Nice. All right, so how is our plague doing? Our wave of suffering?
So it's already spread.
Yeah.
Over a
getting
lot
there.
of the territory there, and it's going to start moving to other cities. It moves faster along roads, so you can see that it's already branching up in those two directions, and so it will hit the other cities very quickly. I've already got a couple of cities building plague doctors in anticipation of the plague. I also did not get castles finished before this happened, which is unfortunate.
I'm sure everything will be fine.
Yeah, we'll find out.
So why do you want? I can't remember what it's called. The unlock with castles. I know that's
Walled
a
quarter.
Walled quarter.
Walled
yes.
quarter,
I know
yes.
that's very important for this.
So Walled Quarter has a 15% chance to avoid plague deaths every single turn, which
Okay.
is relatively low, but every little bit helps. And by plague deaths, it means the population of a city reducing. So when you build this in a city, it reduces the chance that the population will go down every single turn. The Walled Quarter also has several unique buildings in it, specific to this scenario, which the art for is fantastic. We'll take a look at that once we get one of them built. But they are crucial to survive in this scenario. And so I'm trying to get those down as fast as possible so that 15% chance can come online.
Nice. And it looks like there's also a lot of pillaging going on here, which is going to help with your purchasing, right?
Yes, that is the hope. So I am pillaging up here against England, which both hurts them and helps me. Eventually, this swordsman down here might come over and start pillaging in some of these free cities to the east. But right now, we're trying to just target English cities because it is still versus, right? I'm still playing against these AI players, and if this were multiplayer, England could be another human player. And so it is an opportunity for me to get a leg up on them and try to win the scenario.
Nice. All right, so we do have a couple of people asking in chat when Gathering Storm will be out. It is out tonight at midnight Eastern Time, which is 8 hours away right now-ish. You do the math.
So you got your first Civic?
I did,
You
yes.
can open up that tree and look at the policies?
Yeah, so we are able to slot our policies now. And there are 4 available off of feudalism, one of which is a wild card, but all of these have to go into wild card policy slots because that's what every single civ has regardless. So I have this papal policy slot, which costs 4 faith per turn if I do slot something in there. And if you have no faith income and no faith left, it means you can't slot that policy, and that might happen in this scenario. We'll find out.
Your faith income's pretty good.
Yeah.
So
25.
far things are things are looking well, but
I'm
that
playing
might not still be the
ignorance.
case.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Right. I am not going to use that policy slot right now, though. I'm not going to be building military. I'm going to be building plague doctors in most of those cities since plague is coming through. So I want the civilian units policy instead of the military units one. And because the plague is coming through, I won't be able to work tiles, so additional food on farms and plantations won't help. This is for after the plague is gone, and I'm trying to rebuild my cities. So I'm going to reduce my gold income, or my gold maintenance, so that I have better income and can try to keep that going.
Nice.
And so since neither of those is really advantageous right now, we're not going to cost ourselves 4 faith per turn by slotting that third policy slot.
So there's a number of different play styles that are suitable. Carl's like pillage and acquire gold method is one way. The comment he made about serfdom not being applicable because you won't be able to work tiles. If you're playing as England, England's unique ability in the Black Death is labor coercion, which lets you pay to make plague-infested tiles workable again. for 10 turns.
That's cool.
So England can turn their territory back on even though the plague is rampant, but they have to spend gold to do it.
Right.
So if you're England, you might take an approach where you go gold heavy, coerce all of your farm country back into production, and then slot serfdom. And what you might find is that you can actually outcompete the death. Like you can regrow faster,
Nice.
and your cities will be able to survive. Carl's tactic is going to be more kind of like, turtle up and let the plague wash over, and then try to springboard back as fast as possible.
Okay.
It's fairly effective.
Like I said, there's different ways, different solutions to the same problem.
There are a lot of different solutions.
Yeah.
Conquering is certainly one, and that works very well for the Holy Roman Empire. They get a unique unit in this scenario that's very good at combat and very strong on offense. So capturing those free cities is definitely another possibility. They have districts in them already built, and production is very valuable, so having districts pre-built is super important. So that's definitely a opportunity is to go out and try to take over cities. But instead, I'm just going to be pillaging them because it's a little bit faster than trying to conquer an entire city, and it allows me to just make those purchases as quickly as possible.
Nice. All right, so we got our first plague doctor, right?
I'm going to zoom in.
Yeah, zoom in on that
I moved
guy.
him out of the city. I'm going to zoom in so we can see him
He's
there.
so cool.
See the little fella. So Plague Doctor's ability is they have two. They can treat the plague, which reduces its duration by 50%. So it's kind of the Giant Slayer ability. He can drastically cut the plague's duration on a plot, but he can't eradicate it.
Okay.
And then he has Minister to the city, which will restore loyalty. It'll just grant a block of loyalty to the city. All of the unique units in this scenario are builder style, so they have a number of charges before they're expended.
Okay.
Those can be improved with policies or with buildings. And the loyalty concept that I just mentioned is also an interesting critical component of the scenario, especially at the higher difficulties. When the plague has been in your country long enough, the combination of inherent modifiers that I added for the scenario and starvation, because you can't work any land,
Right.
leads to like precipitous declines in loyalty. Your cities will get super mad in a big hurry and start rebelling. And so having plague doctors on hand is part of how you can fight that. So here's another example of one of those scripted events. So all of these are sort of key to the progression of the plague and the player's responses in semi-procedural ways. So this says that your people are struggling to find answers, and you have two new policies that you can choose that sort of are unlocked by this crisis that you've arrived at.
And now we are going to go use that additional policy slot.
Okay.
Now it is time, because this one gives us additional science from campuses, which we've built in every single city, and it reduces
Oh yeah, that's
plague
great.
effects. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and put that in there, and it's going to cost us.
If you look at Pogrom, though, which was the alternative,
Yes.
that is straight up culture and gold. So that's if Carl was taking the other path, that would be much more effective.
Right. If I was going culture instead of science, and we've got this little notification here that this is going to cost us 4 faith per turn.
Nice. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the history of plague doctors.
Oh yeah.
We were kind of nerding out about this yesterday. I guess, so I had always heard that in the beak face, they kept potpourri at the end.
Or incense, right.
Yeah, or incense. And you had some theories that you had heard about why that was.
I think in my research I came across sort of two ideas. One was that it was part of the prevailing idea of the miasma theory at the time. This is way before germ theory. So they did not know what caused the plague. One of the ideas that medieval society held was about miasma, which is harmful vapors from bogs and sort of fetid parts of cities that's what disease was carried on. And so they felt that clearing the air was how you could avoid getting sick, which is part of why during the plague years, the nobility would flee to country estates because they thought, out of the cities, out of the swamps, we'll be safe here. They were totally wrong. But so plague doctors would carry these sort of air-cleansing, sweet-smelling herbs in their masks to be sort of localized anti-miasma devices. That was one theory.
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you there.
Thank you, Carl.
Come back to the second theory later, because we have another event that I want you to talk about.
Yeah, this is a really good one. So
It really
because
is.
some of the events are just this happened, now you have these new abilities, new powers that you can choose to use. This is actually a choice. You have to decide. So as the plague gets worse, you start having to sort of break one way or the other about how, as a society, you're going to respond. And this is informed a bit by the historic character. So in this event, you have to decide whether to kind of embrace what would amount to socialized medicine, like send plague doctors out, pay for the poor to be healed.
Yep.
And the other is sort of treat them as sinners, which they actually thought at the time the plague was a visitation of divine punishment, and that they needed to atone, and that was how they were going to become well again. So depending on which one you pick, you either get the scholar unit, which is a science accelerator, or you get the aforementioned flagellant, which is a culture and faith accelerator, and also a pro-loyalty device.
Ooh.
And just like the plague doctor, these are, you can build them or buy them in your cities. They have so many charges.
Right. And they count as civilian units. So that policy we have is going to help with either one of these,
Nice.
whichever we go.
So I'm guessing we're going for treat the sick.
We're going with treat the sick to get the scholar, since we're going the science route.
Yeah, so we won't be able to show off the flagellant in this live stream, though I do recommend taking a close look at it. We got about as close to its historical nature as we could while retaining our ESRB rating.
Yeah.
It's not a pleasant story, the history of the flagellant.
Yeah, I imagine that, oh my God.
Yeah, it's all over. Although Avignon is finally plague-free. Notice there's a little
good.
There's a little indicator on a city when there is plague affecting the city center, and that is gone from Avignon. So we're finally able to do things here again. However, the tile that I want the wall quarter on, this one here, is still affected. So I am unable to build the walled quarter on that tile.
Can you send the Plague Doctor there?
I can send the Plague Doctor there, but the Plague Doctor is so valuable that it is not worth using him on that tile.
Oh, okay.
So I can move him and reduce the plague on that tile by 50%, the duration of the plague on that tile. But we want to save that for the city itself to reduce population loss, or to save him for adding loyalty to the city, because loyalty is going to become a problem later.
Okay.
Just to follow up on our thought from earlier, the other thought about Plague Doctor masks and incense was just that they worked among the sick and dying, and it was smelled really bad.
Yeah.
So they just had that to make it a little easier on them.
I could believe that.
Yeah. I mean, Plague Doctor was not a good job. They died in huge numbers. They were not well paid. They effectively were mandated by some governments and religious institutions. It was a lousy time for everybody.
Yeah, but they make great party masks now. So
Yeah. Now
we've got that.
Right. Their legacy is secure.
Yeah.
Halloween forever.
It is very fascinating though, just how you took this really horrible time in history and made what I thought was quite a compelling game experience.
I'm glad you like it. Yeah. I had a lot of fun doing it. I read some books like I can recommend to the community Norman Cantor's In the Wake of the Plague, which is great. It's about the plague's sort of epidemiology, but also about the economics, which had a lot to do with how I modeled this scenario.
Oh, interesting.
Like, how did society actually function or not, as the case may be, while it was rampant, and then what did they do afterwards? And sort of that was part of the impetus for saying this would make a good Civ scenario. It's a good tie-in to sort of you're building, you're tending, you're managing. We're just going to throw like one gigantic storm of a challenge at you while you're rolling with it, and give you a couple tools to solve it for yourself.
Okay, someone wants to know, is it possible to make enough of the Plague Doctors to keep the plague away from a city?
It is. You would really have to focus. In fact, one of my favorite ways to play is as Castile using their Sword of Faith special ability, which Sword of Faith is once a unit has moved or acted on a turn, you can spend 10 faith to refresh its moves and actions. So you can act twice.
Nice.
So what I like to do is keep a Plague Doctor sort of off to the side, wait for the plague to strike a city, and then come in and double minister on the same turn by spending faith. And in one fell swoop, you can reduce the plague duration in the city almost to 0. And then the city might take 1, maybe 2 turns of plague, and then it's fine. And so that city can keep building. It becomes a little island of health amidst the sea of plague. And I keep my Plague Doctors for that purpose.
Right.
There's alternative ways to use Sword of Faith. It makes excellent conquest, for instance, because you can fight twice before you take plague damage. But by using Plague Doctors as soon as the plague appears and sort of dogpiling on it, you can reduce it to 1 turn of duration, and then you will suffer 0 to 1 population death, and have the city from that. Now, the city's holdings will all be plagued, but the city itself will be safe.
So we are going to use the Plague Doctor now.
Okay.
Because we just had another outbreak event, and this one was in Paris.
Oof.
So I'm going to go ahead and minister to the sick to reduce the duration.
Now, how do I know how long the plague is going to be in a tile?
It's in Tooltip. If you hover over the tile,
over the tile, yes.
It'll tell you 5 turns.
Oh, great. Okay.
And that's on every single tile.
Yeah, every tile that's got plague will tell you how long it's
Okay.
going to go.
And it lasts different times based on...
It's all procedural, so depending on when it arrives on a tile, it has a range that it can land in.
Okay.
That's also based on difficulty, so at the higher difficulties, it'll last longer.
So he just took damage. He took 20 damage because he's standing on a plagued tile. And that happens to every single unit that is in plague, whether it's yours or somebody else's or Free Cities, all of them. Plague Doctors are not immune to the plague.
No, not even close.
Not even close. I did move some of my units off the coast because there is no plague in the ocean.
Unless there is a oceanic improvement.
Yes. If there's an improvement adjacent to the land, so like if I were to build fishing boats here, the plague would move there.
Okay.
However, this one is safe unless this
no.
one were to be improved by England, and then it would chain itself out. But anything that is further out and does not have anything that it can spread to is a safe tile. So this guy is safe right now. The harbor is not. The harbor will continue to be plagued. So I've moved those guys off into the water so that they're safe. But the plague doctor sitting in a city is taking damage, and he will continue to take damage until he dies, or I can get him somewhere safe, or use all his charges. He only has 1 charge left, so I'm going to go ahead and use that one too.
May as well fire him up.
Right.
Yeah. That's great. You looked like you were going to say something.
No, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Wondering if there's other questions.
There are a few people asking what we're doing. I guess you've just tuned in. This is the Black Death scenario for Civilization 6, Gathering Storm, which is coming out tonight at midnight Eastern Time. And someone said on here, impressive scenario. So,
Oh, thanks.
Nice job.
It was a lot of fun to do. I sort of sojourned on the Civ team for a little while to do this more or less exclusively, this in the War Machine scenario, which was educational. Got to kind of bring an outsider's perspective to Gathering Storm, turn off a lot of the features of the game that were not suitable. And like I said earlier in the stream, if you're just tuning in, stretch the legs of the modding and scenario tools. So all of you people out there who think that this is cool and would like to see more like this, look in the mirror. As a member of the community, you have the power to do scenarios like this as well.
Yeah.
You may not have all of the art assets that I was able to enjoy, but all of the gameplay functionality, all of the UI overrides, everything unique, like those events and everything that you see, are totally exposed and accessible to a scenario builder from the community.
Nice.
Which is really cool.
All right, what do you got for us?
The Mass
Carl?
Grave.
We have another unique building here. This goes in the walled quarter called the Mass Grave.
Nice.
It reduces the plague duration in the city by 2 turns. So just a flat reduction, which is phenomenal. So we're going to go ahead and start building that, and we'll take a look at it when it's done.
Cool.
I might be able to purchase one.
I had a little bit of fun with the design of some of these because if you notice, the Mass Grave has a citizen slot because historically people lived in cemeteries during the
The keepers.
Well,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
poor people, much like when we had Hoovervilles, when they were, they couldn't survive in the countryside on their tenant estates. They would flee to the cities, and it became so overcrowded that people would live in the necropolises. Some people also thought that the houses of the dead were safe from the plague because they were sacred places.
Okay.
There's a lot of superstition and
Yeah.
faith wrapped up in the origins of the plague and its movement. And when I learned that fact, I was like, well, even though you probably don't need citizen slots, I'm going to put one in because it's a nice touch. It's fun to do.
Many people called that out in chat when he hovered over it.
Yeah.
It did remind me. I was doing a tour of like an old mansion recently, and we were looking at the graves in the back, and they had the old like table-shaped mausoleums. Not those are the big ones. It's the little ones that look like tables.
Like sarcophagi?
Yeah. And the woman who was showing us around was saying that back in the day they would have picnics at the family sarcophagi and just eat on top of the table so that everyone was kind of together again. It's like, oh,
I actually think that's pretty sweet.
it is sweet.
Yeah.
In a bit of a macabre way, but it is very sweet to like be all together.
I don't know, like a healthy appreciation for the naturalness of death
Yeah.
is good. Now, the Black Death was not natural.
No.
I don't think anyone back then had a healthy appreciation of it. They wanted it to stop. But they had a lot of theories as to why it was happening and what to do about it, which created this environment of sort of perfect chaos for about 5 years while it was going on. And it's not the only epidemic that had such a sort of strong reaction. The Black Plague struck Europe and the Middle East a number of times throughout history, and there's been other famous epidemics that had similar kind of society destabilizing effects. This is just, the Black Death is really famous and recognizable and fun, the plague doctors and everything. So more than the Spanish flu or, a modern outbreak of something like Ebola.
Right.
The Black Death had to be the one. If we were going to have a standard bearer for a disease-based scenario, it
Yeah.
would have to be this one.
No, and I think it definitely came together in a really incredible way. So some people are asking, how does the plague spread around? We talked a little bit about this earlier. It moves quicker down roads, but do units carry it?
So, yeah, the plague is tied only to the plots. Units kind of can come and go. They can escape it or suffer within it. It travels in waves where it seeds in coastal cities and then spreads across the landscape from there. It'll every turn, every plot adjacent to a plagued plot has a chance to contract it, and that chance goes up if the plot is sort of especially susceptible, which is to say it has a road, or it has a rural improvement, or is a city, or all three. And then once the plot gets plagued, it is plague-stricken for a finite number of turns. That's not modifiable except through the Plague Doctor.
Yep.
And then it goes away, and it is clear for the duration of that wave. And behind the scenes, I can tell you the code is tracking the waves, and so when a wave is done, it'll sort of reset the table, and every plot will be valid again for the next wave.
All right.
We have a new event here that's going to be an A/B choice, and this is, I think, when the scenario starts to get really interesting. The first one is the 2 units, but now we have penalties starting to be imposed, and there's no way around them. So on one side, we are going to get hit with -1 culture, -1 faith in all cities, and that's sort of, our spirits are drained. We're sort of losing faith here. And the other side is our efforts are useless, -1 science, and -10% growth in all cities. And that 10% growth hurts because your cities go down in population every single time, and so you need them to recover in order to work everything again. So that's, that really hurts no matter what path you're taking, but because the science is even worse because we that's the path we're choosing here, we're going to take the -1 culture, -1 faith.
Whereas I would say that if, in my favorite way to play as Castile, that's usually a very faith-heavy build. Like, Carl started by building all campuses, I start by building all holy sites.
Okay.
Stacking up the shrines and buying tons of stuff with faith. Like, I almost never build Plague Doctors, I buy them all.
Okay.
Right.
So losing any kind of faith income would punish you if you were playing Castile the way I play it.
Yeah, that was really similar to my first experience playing. Like, everything I was buying with faith. And it was, I felt like I was doing very well for a little while, and then everyone just died.
Yeah, one of the things I like about the scenario is that it's very difficult. It's engaging all the time. Like, stuff is always going on. There's always a problem somewhere. But at the same time, it's hard to tell prior to the actual moment whether you're going to win or lose.
Yeah.
I was playing it myself after months away from the scenario because I'm off to a different project now. And I won on turn 83 out of turn 85. So I squeaked one in there.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was like, I got this. I designed it. I should know what to do. And it's a cakewalk. And I barely won. Using my favorite strategy on Prince difficulty, which is the sort of the baseline.
Right.
And I didn't know if I was going to squeak it out or not until I managed to. It was a fun, a sort of fun affirmation of the balance of the scenario that it will walk with you the whole way. It'll be a challenge and sort of a win by a nose, no matter what you do, or lose by a mile.
By a Plague Doctor's nose, one might say.
Well, it's longer, greater margin of victory.
So how far are you in the tech tree here? Not very, right?
We're getting there.
Okay.
So we've got 3 more to do.
Cool.
And you're at turn 28?
We're at turn 28, so we're doing pretty well here. I was able to get the Scholar off a couple of times, which definitely helped, and I've been able to pillage a couple of tile improvements that give science, and that was huge. That is another reason why I really like pillaging. You get culture from a couple, and we were able to boost ourselves through the civic tree that way. And that would have been better, obviously, if we were going a culture path, but it's still helpful to have the policies that those unlock.
You're going to make it look easier.
Well, we are only on Prince.
Well,
I have a hard time with this scenario on anything much higher.
Yeah, I think the name for the achievement to win the Black Death on Deity is Dance Macabre.
Oh my God.
And Carl, all the Carl will tell me about it is that it is possible.
It is possible.
And then he gets this faraway look in his eye and we'll say no more.
Right. Well, that's the check. We like to push everything to be as hard as it can possibly be when it can't be beaten, and then we roll things back until it can be beaten. And all the check is can it be beaten in some way, shape, or form? So as long as somebody has beaten it once, we stop, sort of rolling things back there, and we just move forward from that point on. And so things can be very hard on Deity because that's the approach that we took to balancing that. As long as it is beatable by somebody.
Right. And a lot of credit to Carl and his team. I was working almost entirely solo on the 2 scenarios, and Carl especially, but Carl and his team had a huge impact on this scenario coming out as well as it did, and War Machine as well. On balancing them, on sort of getting the flavor right, finding that right balance between this is your game, but it's also the historical setting, and you have to sort of play by those rules. You have to do it the way it was done. Also, you can do it your own way. And tuning, the little details, like how much loyalty do you lose for the first outbreak, for the second outbreak? How much money do you get for pillaging this or that? And how is this going to translate into what you need to win? So that if you play the scenario and you like it, community, you can thank Carl and his crew as much as me or as the Civ team as a whole for their efforts.
Yeah, we've got an incredible QA department here.
What?
I forgot that I had a plague doctor over here, and they have passed away.
Oh no!
Due to plague because I was not paying attention. That is terrible.
Oh.
That is a waste of production.
Yeah.
I still think you're doing okay.
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
But every single unit loss hurts.
Yes. Someone asked, what happens if everyone in a city dies?
It stops. I mean, the city isn't demolished.
Okay.
It will sit. I believe it will sit at 0 population until it is able to make food again and grow, or maybe sit at 1. I think you cannot actually drop below 1. So somebody somewhere will survive the plague no matter what. I think historically there was a low but significant amount of natural immunity to the pestilence that has actually perpetuated to today because such a huge percentage of the European population that didn't have resistance died.
Right.
That actually it's a lot higher. There's a lot of natural immunity in the background population. All this to say, your city will arrest at 1 population and be mostly useless until the plague moves on, and then it can start to grow and feed itself and put itself back together.
We just unlocked 2 more unique buildings for the scenario. The Plague Hospital, which is science-based, and the Keep, which is culture-based.
Nice.
Culture and faith, and science and boost towards scholars and plague doctors. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe these are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, right. You have the wall quarter. You have only so many slots in it. I think you can build the sewer, the mass grave, and then one of those 2.
Right. So obviously we're going to be doing plague hospitals because we're going science here. So let me go ahead and purchase one of those, which is what I've sort of been saving up because I knew that was going to be finishing soon. So now we're able to just outright buy plague hospitals.
Nice.
And there it is.
Oh, that's cool. Is that a little grave site in the middle?
That's the mass grave.
That's the mass grave.
Oh, okay, yeah.
With crows flying above it.
I noticed them in the city centers as well.
Oh, yeah. This is something else the Civ art team got to have fun with. They replaced...
I don't think there's any here.
Yeah, I don't see
cities,
one.
It's based on how many lifetime plague deaths the city has suffered. So this, the way that the city art system is designed, based on its population, it'll attach kind of generic housing units to the city to grow its size. And so for this scenario, they swapped that out for a system that looks at how many deaths it suffered and attaches tombs instead. So the city doesn't get more buildings, it gets more tombs. It becomes a city of the dead, which is just a fun little character. Yeah, and I personally think that the pièce de résistance in the scenario is the plague effects.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Todd and the FX team for this horrible, inky, that sort of Castlevania-esque morass over your land. It really has a cool effect.
Yeah. Yes, someone just said plague sounds fun. I don't think the actual plague would be fun.
No.
But this plague is quite fun. Punishingly fun, I would say.
Another outbreak.
Okay. Is this from the same wave, or have we...
This is a new wave.
Okay.
I believe.
This is wave 2 probably, because you had turn 37.
Yes.
Yeah. So you kind of get on the standard difficulties, you have sort of 2 periods of plague wave when that's mostly what you care about. And then 2 periods of recovery. You have a sort of first recovery in between the 2 waves, and then your back half recovery when, after the second wave goes by, you're more or less clear and you can try to make a rush for victory. On higher difficulties, there will be a 3rd wave too.
Okay.
So you have 2 small windows of recovery and then 1 very small one at the end.
Nice. Now, Carl, it's looking like you may win this.
I might. Yeah. I'm doing pretty well overall.
Yeah, it's only turned 38. You've got lots of time left.
I have a scholar here. Scholars can only be used once per city.
Okay.
So I will pop him here, and then I'll have to move it to a different city to try to use it there because I can't use it in the same place twice. And the entire time you're moving it across the countryside, they are getting hit with plague damage.
Yeah.
Which is not great.
And he's 2 charges, right?
They have 2 charges,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
What's happening up here? Oh, that's another
Scandinavia's-
plague
I'm moving
spot.
into the free cities to pillage their harbors here.
Okay, free cities can have plague too as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Every city in the game will have plague, and in fact, the AI, and this is probably sort of true of scenarios generally. The AI does not always keep pace with new gameplay features. That's by design because exposing the AI to the modding tools is thorny. So Carl is handling the plague pretty well. If you play this game single player, you'll notice that the other civs do not. They suffer really badly. And so if Carl was to sort of make an expedition and plunge deep into the heart of British territory, he would see that Britain is pretty well crippled by it. So especially late in the game, other nations and the free cities in particular make really easy pickings as long as you have an army to go after them.
You say that as I'm getting wrecked by free city units here.
Most of the time I do.
The Holy Roman Empire is particularly useful at that because of their unique unit, the Teuton Ignite. So they are great at going and taking over the free cities that are surrounding them.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned that already, but still, worth repeating.
Yes, this is a new scenario for you folks just joining us. This is the Black Death, coming as part of Gathering Storm, which is coming online tonight at midnight Eastern Standard Time. 7 hours now. We're at the 7-hour mark.
We're getting there.
Yeah, today has been a lot of fun. It's been a big celebration of Gathering Storm. I don't know if you guys watched any of the stream earlier.
All of them.
We had some artists, we had composers, we had the designers. We talked about Coupe a lot and how he came to be.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. You know,
Yeah,
Gathering
it's been great
Storm's coming out real soon. Civilization 6 base game is free to play right now on Steam for anyone that maybe hasn't picked it up yet and wants to try it. It will be free to play until tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And there's also a bananas sale on the Civilization 6 products, not Gathering Storm, up to 70% off, which is crazy and wonderful. So hop over to Steam and grab your free Civ and pick up some expansions if you like it.
Looks like you got a loyalty problem.
I do.
What's wrong? You're not taking care of your cities, Carl?
Apparently not. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. You start taking penalties just from the plague outbreaks.
Plague panic.
When they spread through. So regardless of your population, whether it's high or low, you'll just get these major penalties every single time you have an outbreak. And they rack up quickly. So by this point in the game, we start to have real loyalty problems. So in 19 turns, I'll lose this city. However, the Plague Doctor is able to add 20 loyalty. So once it starts getting low, we start using that. And that is crucial on higher difficulties. You need Plague Doctors racked up. You need them waiting around to just keep your cities from flipping to free cities.
Yeah, and that's where the scenario can surprise you on the back half. If you are like we were saying to Carl, oh, you got plenty of turns. You're doing great on the tech tree, and he's got 8 turns to complete invention. That number can change in a hurry if his major cultural and scientific centers start abandoning his nation because they're panicking because they don't believe that they'll survive.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm doing phenomenally well. There's actually even more punishing events that can pop up depending on the number of plague deaths you've had, and we've not run into those. So there's some that can hit you with like -10 faith for every single city, which would put me in the negative, and then I wouldn't be able to have that additional policy slot active.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of really, really horrible things that I have been able to luckily avoid. And as loyalty decreases, as this bar drops, your yields in your city begin to go down as well. They get penalized. So not only are you getting hit with these penalties from the events, but you're getting hit with penalties from loyalty. And yeah, you'll end up with like 2 science a turn.
Yeah, I
instead
think
of
that
this
was
near 80 I've
about
got.
where I was
Yeah.
when I was playing the other day. It was very unfortunate. I was waiting for us to do this stream before I played it again because I wanted to get an idea of from the expert how to best approach it. Yeah.
Well, Carl could tell you all of the normal and abnormal playstyles that will succeed in the Black Death scenario for sure.
Now, something we were talking about a little bit when we were rehearsing this yesterday. How much of like the landscape is procedurally generated?
Good questions, and that's a great kind of entree or invitation to modders to take a look at. So what you see, this map, was made using our World Builder tool, which I mentioned earlier in the stream is not officially released yet. It's still a development tool that you have to sort of find the setting to activate in your shipping build of Civ. But you can open it up and mess with it, and everything that's in the game as you see it today is what I used. I didn't use any sort of special accessible inside Firaxis only stuff. So that built the coastlines and placed all the cities and all the roads. So I matched the map of 14th century Europe to what you see here. After that, if you look in the script file, modders out there, you can see the process by which the sort of land is seeded at the start of a new game. So every city gets, based on its initial size, sort of a smattering of semi-random improvements and districts. And then there's a sort of further shuffling on as to starting stats and starting states for every city that'll make them more or less susceptible to the plague. And then the plague system itself gets sort of cohorts that are rolled at the starting of the game that govern which cities are more or less likely to be the outbreak sites and how the plague is going to, how easily it's going to advance from there. So landscape, the literal terrain was built and everything else is procedural. So if you play the scenario again, it'll be about half identical, and the other half will be new, or different at least.
And you said that the plague can spawn randomly at a different place every time.
Yeah, I mean, Carl's got 4 coastal cities, 3, I can't remember. Rennes, Brest, and Avignon, and
yeah, 3.
Right. So as his ports, those are the 3 potential origin points for each plague wave. Then there are the free cities, and then Calais and Bordeaux, which are also port cities that can themselves be the sites of outbreaks and then spread over land. So there's 5 to 6 vectors into France that the plague can travel by. And the plague system will roll sort of a subset of those to be the spots every time you start the game. And so it knows this game is going to be in Rennes, this turn is going to be in Brest. And that's invisible to the player. But if you were a modder and you wanted to see how that was done, or if you wanted to change it, or if you wanted to use it to devise your own scenario, you can look in the Black Death scenario.lua script file and read all about it.
Awesome. Are there limits to where you can put walled quarters? Limits per city, terrain, any of that?
It's 1 per city. I don't think there's any limits on...
Same as other districts.
Yeah, I don't think there's any limit on terrain. It's just you want to try to get those adjacency bonuses.
Okay.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about how you're feeling, like what's on your mind.
I'm feeling a little sick right now. But I think we're going to win.
Yeah,
we've got
we're 1 turn away.
I purchased a whole bunch of...
1 turn to go, yeah.
Oh, there we go, I see.
Yeah.
I purchased a whole bunch of universities, so...
Nice.
Yeah, I pillaged all of this pillaging up here. There was like 400 gold, which is about the price of a university, so that worked out really well. Yeah, 432 gold. So I can now go buy another one someplace.
Do it.
We'll see if there's another one that needs it. I'm not sure if I can.
You've been rapacious in your pillaging. If this was normal Civ, that would never stand. You'd be in wars right now. But that's the power of a scenario. I can change all the rules. I can
so there's no penalties to, like diplomatic penalties to pillaging.
Diplomacy is basically turned off in this scenario. Like you're locked into war with England. Everybody else is a free city and is concerned only with themselves. So yeah, Carl can sort of freely roam around and start little brush fires wherever he wants.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with how quickly you seem to have gotten victory this time.
Well, I am a little bit more used to playing on higher difficulties.
Okay, that's fair.
For testing purposes.
Yeah, a little pro player.
Right.
Power play.
It certainly makes up for
Monday.
You know,
Yeah, I
the
do.
incident.
Right.
Like, lest anyone
ambush.
in the community think that Carl doesn't know how to play Civ.
And I appreciate Ed pointing out the fact that he knew I hadn't noticed the notification. I was watching for that, and yeah, he had to say on stream.
I
it was
remember that
like,
moment.
Carl, you might want to look at your notifications, and it was too late. It's too late.
Hey.
Here we go. Oh, I couldn't look at it.
That's okay. It'll be there for the people once they get the game.
Aw. That's great.
Yep.
Well done, Carl.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank
well,
you.
thank you guys so much for coming out and defeating the Black Death on stream today. That was great. I really like this scenario. I can't wait for people to play it.
Yeah, this
in
one.
just a few hours.
And also take a look at the War Machine scenario, which is the World War I themed one. It was demoed briefly for the Play by Cloud segment a few days ago, or a week ago? I can't remember.
I don't remember either.
Something like that.
Yeah, something
Time's
like that.
weird
That
right
one
now.
is multiplayer only, though, so
only.
you do have to load that up in multiplayer and go head-to-head for that scenario.
Awesome. Thank you again. Thank you, Civ fans, for coming out and celebrating our pre-launch day with us for Civilization 6 Gathering Storm. It's coming your way tonight. The time is near. It is 7 hours away. So pick it up. Let us know what you think. Show us pictures of your awesome volcanic disasters, your plagues, all of that. Thank you again, and good night.